Sweden means weapons, and the CV90 infantry fighting vehicle has already gained a solid reputation on the front line. The BMP-1 we used to work with was a tin can, but the CV90? That's a solid, reliable machine. But in the chaos of the Russian-Ukrainian war, is being good and reliable enough? The CV90 is the brainchild of Hägglunds, a Swedish company now owned by the British giant BAE Systems. And they didn't cut corners. This machine is precise, high-tech, and built to perform. Our gunners say it's a surgical tool, highly accurate, deadly precise. It can even take on tanks. First off, it's surprisingly spacious. Despite having similar dimensions to Soviet BMPs, the absolute antithesis of interior space, CV90 offers way more room for troops. Second, it's safe. Compared to the BMP-1 still crawling around in the Russian army, the CV90 has twice the armor protection. And then there are the seats, built to absorb shock. They reduce the impact of mine blasts or other explosions, something that could mean the difference between life and death. Another major safety feature is the Barracuda system, a high-tech camouflage net that drastically reduces the vehicle's visibility. It protects against night vision, thermal imaging. It makes the vehicle about 70% less visible than other machines. It hides the heat signature and even helps conceal it from the naked eye.
And does this actually help in combat?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say 70% of our survivability comes from this protection.
So how do the enemy spot a CV90?
They don't. It just looks like a wrecked, gray, burned-out vehicle. And that's just the beginning. The CV90's capabilities don't stop there. They only get better. With enemy drones swarming the battlefield, speed is everything in the Russian-Ukrainian war. A fast vehicle can complete its mission and get out before an FPV drone locks on or artillery zeroes in. And when it comes to speed, the CV90 has zero issues. With a top speed of 43 miles per hour, this thing is practically a Formula One car in military terms. Speaking of F1, its suspension is based on active damping technology, just like in high-performance race cars. Oh, and see this button? Support the channel's growth with a simple like. It has the best suspension. No Russian or Soviet model comes close to this adaptive suspension. It adjusts to the terrain, softens or stiffens as needed. In real life, this looks like this. This smooths out off-road travel, boosts speed, and improves mobility. The mobility is incredible. We pushed forward to enemy positions, hit nearly a meter of mud, dove in, powered through, and got the job done. So, sounds perfect, right? A dream machine? Not exactly. Sometimes an advantage can also be a drawback. Tracks, oil maintenance, road wheel replacement, that's all on the driver. But for real repairs, you need a specialized mechanic. Hit subscribe for more honest reports from the front lines. Despite all its perks, CV90 is a high-tech machine that needs specialists. And not every Ukrainian brigade has the tools or know-how to maintain something built with F1 technology. Running gear is the heart of any combat vehicle, and CV90's maintenance demands far more skill and tools than a Bradley or Marder. Of course, if you want simplicity, you can stick with Soviet-era armor, fix it with a crowbar and some creative swearing. But Ukraine's 1,500-kilometer front line means skilled personnel are just as critical as firepower. And there's another challenge looming: standardization. Sweden and Denmark operate different versions of the CV90, and Ukraine is getting both. That means extra logistics, extra parts, and extra headaches. It's basically two separate vehicles under the same name, with different components needed for each. But that's a problem for later. For now, Sweden's CV90s are ready to hit the battlefield. The Russian-Ukrainian war is one of the first serious tests for the CV90 in full-scale combat. As of now, multiple Ukrainian units are using these vehicles. Here, fighters from the 93rd Mechanized Brigade are perfecting their skills on the Swedish machine. And in this video from the 14th Mechanized Brigade, a tank and a CV90 move in close to enemy positions, delivering firepower before the infantry assault. Overall, the Swedish IFV is performing well in combat, which really annoys the Russians. They've been desperately hunting CV90s since summer because they can't take them out. They'd send two T-90s just to deal with a single CV90. Early on, they kept mistaking them for tanks and intercepted communications. They'd fire two Grad rocket barrages, hit them with 120mm mortars, artillery, everything, just to stop one CV90. And yet, sometimes Russian efforts do pay off. In this footage, an enemy FPV drone hits a CV90 on the battlefield. But as you can see, the machine took the hit and the crew survived. Here's a closer look at what those impacts leave behind. Just yesterday, we got hit by an FPV. See the damage?
And these are parts from whatever hit you, right?
Yeah, looks like some DIY job, see? Even wood pieces. Every loss hurts Ukraine because there are only about 50 CV90s in the Ukrainian army, and that's one of this IFV's biggest issues in the war. There simply aren't enough of them to dominate the battlefield. Each CV90 is treated like a treasure, often kept in reserve while other vehicles take on more routine tasks. Which raises a big question. Is there a more practical IFV for Ukraine? Let's start with a battle-proven alternative, the Marder. The biggest advantage Marder has over CV90? Numbers. Ukraine has around 200 Marders, nearly 4 times as many as CV90s. Essentially, the Marder is from the previous generation compared to the CV90, so it falls behind in technology. Armed with a 20mm cannon, its firepower is weaker than the CV90's 40mm gun. It was originally designed as an anti-aircraft gun, so it can fire in bursts, single shots, 4-round bursts, 8-round bursts. It also has armor-piercing sub-caliber rounds, high-explosive fragmentation rounds, and tracers. The CV90's modular armor is also superior to the Marders. The same goes for its engine. Overall, the CV90 outperforms the Cold War-era Marder in quality, but Germany sent far more Marders to Ukraine, which is a crucial advantage in full-scale war. And of course, no video about Ukrainian armored vehicles would be complete without mentioning Bradley. When comparing CV90 versus Bradley, the Swedish IFV still comes out ahead. Better firepower, armor, and a more powerful, quieter engine. That stealth lets the CV90 get dangerously close to enemy positions before striking. This is thanks to its quiet engine and Susi rubber tracks, which are lighter, quieter, improve mobility, and offer better protection against explosions and fire. Up to 200 meters, it's practically silent. That means it can complete its primary task, getting the crew as close as possible without being detected. No engine noise, no infrared signature, no night vision detection. They dismount safely, and from there, they can open fire. Western stealthy vehicles are terrifying for Russian troops, who struggle to react when hit by surprise IFV raids. And of course, we can't skip comparing the CV90 to the most common IFV of the Russian army, the BMP-2. The BMP-2 is one of the most frequently seen vehicles on the battlefield in Ukraine, but its thin armor has been a nightmare for its own crews. Even a basic RPG or small shrapnel can rip through the sides or roof. This is a vehicle more dangerous to its crew than to the enemy, but its strength lies in sheer numbers. Obviously, the CV90 can wipe out multiple BMP-2s, but in the end, will quality really beat quantity? The Russians don't count losses in men or metal, and Ukraine refuses to play that game. That's exactly why CV90 and similar IFVs should form the backbone of Ukraine's armored forces. The BMP-2's only advantage is its price. Cheap production and upgrades allow Russia to crank out far more units than Western countries. A Soviet BMP costs under $1 million depending on upgrades, while a CV90 sits at around $10 million. This price tag makes the Swedish IFV one of the most expensive on the market, forcing potential buyers to weigh the pros and cons. But people should always come first. Soviet BMPs are cheap machines for cheap crews. Here, it's completely different. This is expensive tech, but the most valuable thing inside it is the people. By the way, the only Russian IFV that comes close to the CV90 specs is the BMP-3. It packs a 100mm gun, but in every other aspect, the CV90 is miles ahead. Better armor, better automation, and overall better tech. Only its engine power and 70 km/h top speed can somewhat compete. So, what's the bottom line? The CV90 is an excellent machine, but slow production is a serious issue. It outperforms its Western rivals and leaves Russian APCs in the dust, but high cost and complex maintenance prevent it from becoming Ukraine's go-to IFV, at least for now. Localization could change everything. In August 2023, Ukrainian President Zelensky and Swedish PM Ulf Kristersson signed an agreement to produce and maintain CV90s in Ukraine. Since then, there's been radio silence on the project. But let's hope this initiative gets back on track, and we'll see Ukrainian-built CV9s rolling out. So, what do you think? Will the CV90 become Ukraine's main IFV? Will it be replaced by another model? Or do you have a different prediction? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Welcome, Army TV viewers. You're watching Military Television of Ukraine. Today's episode of Military Discovery is all about the world's best infantry fighting vehicles. We're skipping the Israeli Namer and German Puma for now, since they haven't hit the battlefield yet. But the Ukrainian armed forces already have two other heavy hitters in their arsenal: the Swedish CV90 and the American M2 Bradley. We'll be drag racing them, firing their weapons, testing their accuracy, and checking how fast troops can dismount from the back. We'll talk armor, firepower, and everything in between, just to keep things interesting and find out which one comes out on top. Let's go! Vehicle weight?
38 tons.
Engine power?
600 horsepower.
Wheel or levers?
Steering wheel.
Transmission?
Automatic.
Top speed?
33 miles per hour.
Vehicle weight?
28 tons.
Engine power?
500 horsepower.
Wheel or levers?
Steering wheel.
Transmission?
Automatic.
Top speed?
50 miles per hour.
Alright, now let's see which one hits the tree line first. Bradley or the CV90? Bradley on the move. We had a good run. I even rode along, but CV90 won that race. Let's see which one shoots more accurately. What's the caliber of the gun?
40 millimeters.
Max range with high explosive rounds?
Up to 7.8 miles.
Armor piercing range?
Armor piercing goes out to 22 miles.
Rate of fire?
300 rounds per minute.
Autoloader? 24 rounds total?
Yeah, three mags of 8 rounds, all out in 30 seconds.
Max range to knock out a tank from the side?
0.9 to 1.2 miles. They've got real punch at that range.
All right then, let's put that accuracy to the test. What's the main gun on the M2 Bradley?
That's the Bushmaster.
Types of rounds it fires?
High explosive and armor piercing.
Max firing range?
2.5 miles.
And its effective range?
1.2 miles.
What about rate of fire?
Around 100 to 200 rounds per minute.
Of course, you can't do a real comparison without checking out the troop compartments, right? Let's start with the CV90, and let's have our Cossacks show us how fast and smooth you can jump in. Dismount! Armor up! So, how's that, Cossacks?
Not bad, but it's actually more comfy inside the Bradley.
All right then, let's check it out. And while we're at it, let's see how fast we can hit the ground on command.
Dismount. Hit the ground.
Now let's show how loading into the Bradley works. Dismount! Armor up! Oh, now this one's more fun.
Yeah, the Bradley's way more comfortable, faster, and more efficient. Especially when you're loading in under pressure. You can carry wounded brothers if needed, plus ammo and gear.
But we've still got to see how dismounting works. So, dismount! Hit the ground! All right, we've had some fun. The drag race, CV90 wins. In the shooting test, CV90 also locked on quicker and took the target out. But I want to go back to the drag race because the Bradley's over 5.5 tons heavier. I think that made the difference in speed. CV90 has those extra traction teeth. And Bradley doesn't have those, right?
No, it doesn't.
But speaking of added weight, the extra mass comes from the Barret 2 explosive reactive armor. And I'm guessing that's saving your life out there. Pretty big plus, huh?
Yeah, it does the job. But even without the reactive armor, the Bradley's already 5.5 tons heavier. Add the extra protection, and that's another almost 4 tons.
So what's the full weight?
On paper, it's about 35 tons, and with the ERA, it's pushing 39 tons.
All right, what's your take?
Give us ERA too, let's even the odds a bit. But I'll say this, even without the ERA, it's holding up against FPV strikes. Only the extra armor takes partial damage. So yeah, even without reactive armor, it still holds.
And this one's modular, right? So you can swap parts out?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything on the turret's modular. The turret itself is about half the size. You actually see the rest is add-on armor.
So modularity is definitely a plus. Now let's talk firepower. The Bradley's got a 25mm gun, while the CV90 rocks a 40mm. In today's combat, when you need to rush infantry into the tree line and lay down a lot of suppressing fire, the Bushmaster looks better thanks to its rate of fire, especially when you switch it to 200 rounds per minute. We've seen that in action. But that 40mm, it hits armored targets a lot harder, right?
Yeah. Plus, the high explosive effect of the round is a lot stronger. Each shell sends shrapnel flying out to about 50 feet. So I don't need to saturate the whole tree line. I can just spread rounds every 33 feet and get the job done. And when it comes to armor, the subcaliber rounds can punch through up to 100mm of armor, maybe even more.
I'll say our HE rounds aren't far behind. We've got shrapnel spread up to 33 feet. And the fire rate really helps, especially if you're laying down a tight group to cover infantry pulling back. Plus, I've got more ammo on board. So yeah, rate of fire gives us an edge.
And you've got those 2 extra surprises?
Yep, 2 Tau missiles. Those can take out a tank head-on. We've already done it. Took out a T-80 by punching through the turret. and our AP rounds armor-piercing go through up to 70 millimeters of armor.
So you're saying you could still use a few more heavy anti-tank options?
But we've got an ace up our sleeve. We can fire very accurately from covered positions out to 8 miles.
So kind of like light artillery?
Exactly.
Since we're already talking about guns and armor, would you want to replace the Bradley's 25mm with a 40mm Bushmaster?
If we could keep the same fire rate we've got now, yeah, I think I would.
And what about putting Bradley's explosive reactive armor onto the CV90?
I'd use some of it.
Like along the sides?
No, just on the front.
But wouldn't that hurt your mobility?
Definitely. A hit to the engine will stop the whole vehicle, so yeah, better to have some protection.
Now about optics. I already spoke to the mechanics, and I know Bradley's got the edge here, right?
Yeah, the driver's got a night camera and a thermal imager. As far as I know, you guys don't have that?
We've only got a basic night vision scope.
Plus, we've got displays for the troops in the back. They can see where the driver's going and what the gunner's targeting. They've got a clear view of the situation outside.
Ours just has voice comms, old school analog, and all in Swedish, by the way.
All right, let's talk mine blasts. Everyone knows Bradley can handle a TM series anti-tank mine. Maybe even 2. What about the CV90?
CV90s can also take a TM hit, even 2, depending on the situation. Sure, you'll lose mobility, but the crew and dismounts usually walk away just fine.
So even without explosive reactive armor, the CV90 can survive mines, AT weapons, and FPV drones. And with ERA, the Bradley handles all of that even better?
Yeah, we've taken FPV hits too. No problem. I've been hit by a mine myself. No injuries. The vehicle holds up. Even if some wires or electronics get damaged, it still drives. One time we took a 1.5 FPV hit, blew through the troop compartment, but the thing kept moving.
And when it comes to night signatures, we've got to mention that massive advantage on the CV90, the Barracuda camo netting. We've seen night footage where you can only make out the tracks and the troops jumping out. This cover blocks both visual and thermal detection. How much of a lifesaver is it really?
That camo really works like you said. The thermal signature of a single infantryman is sometimes more visible than the whole vehicle on thermal. From personal experience, we had the CV90 in a tree line, working from a concealed position. I walked off to the command post and came back later. I knew exactly where it was, it hadn't moved, and I still couldn't see it. You know, trees were bare, weather was clear. Only when I was like 30 feet away did I finally spot it, just standing there between the trees, dirty and blended in perfectly.
Well, we don't have Barracuda camo, but honestly, same story. The Bradley gets so caked in mud that once you park it and throw a couple of branches on, even you can't find it.
And about the Barracuda, it's also installed on the Swedish STRV122 tank. Basically, they're Leopard 2.5. So yeah, Swedish vehicles are big on thermal camouflage. On tanks, IFVs, you name it. And I hear you guys even have a built-in food heater?
Yeah, that's right.
And what's the cooking situation like for you?
As far as I know, the CV90's multi-cooker can boil water in about 20 minutes?
Roughly, yeah.
But come on, we've got those little field burners. Cup of water, 3 minutes, done and gone.
But those things catch fire.
Hey, sometimes you're out on a run. You gotta eat fast, so you down it and go.
All right, multi-cooker advantage neutralized.
On fire safety grounds.
We don't need a multi-cooker anyway.
All right, folks, we've seen pretty much everything. Maybe the CV90 is faster, but it's got lighter armor, it's more accurate, and fires faster, so that's a win. But when it comes to troop comfort, Bradley wins hands down. It's got better optics for the driver and higher fire rate with the main gun. Still, the CV90 hits harder with its 40mm and can engage from concealed positions. Its night camo is also better, no question. On the other hand, the Bradley wins on overall armor protection. Looking at all this, I gotta say, I can't pick a winner. First, came here thinking the newer CV90 would blow the Bradley out of the water. But honestly, they're neck and neck. Each has its strengths and trade-offs. But imagine combining them: CV90's gun, dynamic armor, Barracuda camo, wider troop bay, better underbody protection. That would probably be the best IFV in the world. For now, we've got two of the best, and they're both awesome in their own way. But above all, we've got the best people defending our country. So stay tuned for more field tests and head-to-heads, and see you in the next video. Just take a look at this beauty. The British L119, now being used by Ukrainian forces, has become the main rival to the Soviet D30. But is Western artillery really fit for a war where the barrel barely gets a break from constant firing? Ukrainian gunners have their doubts. We went to Germany for 6 days of training. We asked, what if we fire 200 shells a day? What should we do? How does the barrel hold up? And the American says, pour water on it. Then he comes back half an hour later and goes, actually, we've never fired that much. We might have told you something stupid. British and American forces usually use their L118 and L119 howitzers to support light infantry or air mobile units. The main difference between the two is the type of ammo they fire. L118 uses 105mm shells that only Britain keeps in stock. But L119 can fire rounds that are available across many NATO countries. That's a big reason why Ukrainian artillery crews received L119s. Because it's way easier to find enough ammo when you can tap into the stockpiles of dozens of partners, instead of relying on one country. And in the war against Russia, the rule is simple. The more shells artillery has, the safer the infantry feels. You feel the weight of that responsibility, especially if you've served in the infantry. You know how important it is, when the enemy's coming at you in force, to have support behind you. So giving Ukraine the L119s was a pretty smart move. Smash that like button if you agree. It helps boost the channel and lets us make more content like this for you. But having enough ammo is only half the battle. Can the gun barrel actually take the stress it's under on the battlefield? The American instructors who trained Ukrainians weren't sure, but the reality turned out to be a lot more interesting. My crew's always lucky. We usually fire 50 rounds a day, sometimes up to 100. Our record? One gun fired 206 shells in a single day. That was during the Wagner breakthrough. We were covering our battalion and holding them off. On paper, the L118 howitzer can fire 6 rounds per minute for the first 2 minutes, then 3 rounds per minute during sustained fire over half an hour. But what about real combat? Well, pretty impressive actually. During the Falklands War, British forces managed to fire up to 400 shells a day from a standard L118. So it's safe to say the L119, which is basically the same gun with NATO ammo, holds up just as well. In terms of performance, the L119 is often compared to the Soviet D30 and the two S1 Gvozdika self-propelled gun, both in the 122mm category. Sure, those pack a bigger punch, but their barrels? Not even close to the condition of a well-kept L119. The big advantage is the barrel. That's where the accuracy comes from, and that's the biggest strength of this howitzer. And when shells are limited, accuracy is a huge deal. We can hit targets much more effectively than with the older Soviet stuff. Those worn-out D-30 barrels just couldn't deliver the accuracy we needed for fortified positions. Of course, there's a catch. The 105mm shell used in the L119 isn't as powerful as a 122mm one, which can carry up to 4 kilos of explosives. But still, we take one precise hit over a dozen shots that miss. Soviet barrels may rain down more shells, but that doesn't always mean better results. One underrated perk of the L119? Its low silhouette. The smaller size makes it harder for the enemy to spot. And if things get hot, the crew can pack up and vanish in no time. It's fast to set up, fast to pack down. The whole process is just smooth and easy. Also, and this might surprise you, the L119 is way quieter than its Soviet counterparts. That means less ringing in your ears and a lower chance of giving away your position. It's just super quiet. You almost can't hear the shot. It doesn't rattle your skull like the old Soviet gear. Even the Russians have taken notice. Though, maybe not in the way they'd like. Sometimes it's actually kind of nice hearing their intercepted comms. It's coming from somewhere, but we have no idea where. At night, when drones are buzzing above the front lines, artillery positions are easy to spot thanks to the muzzle flash that lights up with every shot. But here's a surprise, the L119 barely flashes at all. You can imagine the starry-eyed look on Ukrainian soldiers' faces when they found that out. I used to work with the D-30. The L119's got a few advantages. The D-30 gives off a huge flash at night, but this British one, barely any. You just can't see it in the dark. It doesn't give away your position. Another big plus? The L119 is noticeably lighter than its Soviet counterparts, a fact that logistic teams are very happy about. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this. Real war, real gear, no fluff. Western armies usually tow it with trucks or high-mobility vehicles, but that's not all. You can sling it under a UH-60 helicopter, or even fly 2 of them at once with a CH-47. And if the chopper can't land, no problem. They can airdrop it with parachutes. Ukraine isn't doing large-scale airborne ops just yet, but artillery units still benefit from how easy it is to move these guns around with a Humvee. Fast, nimble, gets the job done. It weighs 1,900 kilos. The D-30? Almost a ton heavier. This thing you can literally move by hand. 2 people are enough to spin it around. That weight advantage really shines in mobile defense. When Russian FPV drones are hunting you non-stop, or jets are dropping massive bombs in your sector, staying in one spot is just asking for trouble. How fast you move could mean life or death. We're just sitting there with the gun, the Humvee pulls up and boom, cabs incoming, that's it. Your life now depends on luck. Or maybe an FPV spots the gun in the Humvee. That's a priority target for them. Distance from the front line used to mean something. Not anymore. Thanks to FPVs, even rear positions aren't safe, and the D-30's extra range doesn't count for much. Up front, there's only one rule. You're a target. If you don't want to get hit, hide well or move fast. I'd rather hit the enemy more effectively than sit further back. There's barely a difference between being 12 or 15 kilometers away. Those long-range FPVs hit D-30s just the same, and they can hit our gun too. The L119 howitzer is pretty easy to maintain and doesn't give artillery crews much trouble. It rarely breaks down and usually only needs serious repairs after being hit by shrapnel, which, let's be honest, can happen to anyone in this war. All we do is clean it and oil it. If something major breaks, we just send it back to the company. The L119 showed up on the front lines of the Russian-Ukrainian war back in 2022. Since then, they've been used both in defense and to support offensives against Russian positions. They're mostly used against infantry because it takes the shell 30 seconds to travel 10 kilometers, so it's hard to hit moving vehicles. We mostly aim at buildings, stationary equipment, troops, or clusters of enemy forces. But the more skilled Ukrainian gunners don't let that stop them. If drone operators give them the right coordinates, they're quick to fire even at fast-moving targets, like a Russian stormtrooper riding a quad bike. We've hit a Russian tractor with the howitzer, and one spring, we scored a hit on a tank, all moving targets. We've also landed shots on Russian ATVs and motorcycles. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's allies have delivered around 50 L119s to the defense forces. From day one, they were deployed to support airborne units on the front lines, but every gun comes with its own age and barrel wear. The more you fire, the faster the barrel wears out, and the less accurate it becomes. To speed up repairs and keep these guns in the fight, Ukraine's government teamed up with global defense giant BAE Systems. The company has opened a local branch to service the howitzers, produce spare parts, and even manufacture new ones. That's a big deal. It gives hope that towed artillery isn't ready for retirement just yet, and still has a major role to play in future wars. In fact, Ukraine's experience has already made NATO armies rethink their assumptions. Before Russia's full-scale invasion, many NATO countries had been gradually phasing out towed artillery in favor of wheeled and tracked platforms. The Cold War was over, armies were downsizing, and new doctrines were being written for smaller local conflicts. Western engineers also aimed to protect the crews operating these guns. That became especially urgent with the rise of counter-battery radar systems, which can pinpoint enemy firing positions with brutal accuracy. The idea was that an armored capsule would keep crews safe, but modern warfare introduced a new threat: drones capable of detonating ammunition stockpiles. And that forced a serious rethink of how towed artillery fits into the battlefield. Unlike big self-propelled systems, towed howitzers are compact, and that means easier camouflage at well-prepared firing positions. Their ammo is stored separately, so a direct drone hit is less likely to cause a catastrophic explosion. Meanwhile, crews can quickly duck into shelters, often dug and reinforced by the artillery teams themselves. Towed systems also have another key advantage. They're much cheaper and simpler to produce than self-propelled guns. That matters a lot during wartime, when you need to replace losses and equip new units fast. And in that context, the L119 stands out as a very practical choice. It's accurate, relatively affordable, and built to last. In short, it works. What topic should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments. We'll choose from the most liked ones. Oof, this old FV103 Spartan's seen better days. During urban combat, the Russians took out its biggest strength, the tracks that let it hit 60 miles per hour. With the vehicle immobilized, Ukrainian troops had to abandon it. But what if you paired that speed with an M2 Browning? It's simple. Surprise the enemy, lay down suppressive fire, and let the assault team do the rest. Spartan is a British veteran that's made its way back onto the modern battlefield in Ukraine. But maybe it's time. Let's find out. Today, about 1,000 FV103 Spartans are still in service around the world. And while they're over 50 years old, they've been far from idle. After the full-scale invasion, the UK donated 35 Spartans to Ukraine from its own reserves. But as the saying goes, you can never have too many armored vehicles, especially when you're fighting the Russians. That's why Ukrainian volunteers crowdfunded $6.5 million in just 36 hours to buy 60 more Spartans. When your country's at war, those birthday gift funds turn into a 50-call surprise for the enemy. Help us bring you more. Like this video to support the channel. The Spartan wasn't originally designed for storming enemy positions or dropping troops right on the front lines. Its job was to support other units behind the scenes. In the early 1980s, Spartans were mainly used to transport air defense teams, equipped with British man-pads like the Javelin and Starburst. The Javelin was phased out in the 90s. Thanks to its compact size and off-road speed, engineers also used it to quickly deploy support teams. But the Russian-Ukrainian war has flipped more than one military doctrine on its head. So it's no surprise to see the Spartan not just in the rear, but right in the thick of it. Here's what one Ukrainian soldier had to say about how they use it. Our job is to move in unnoticed, complete the task unnoticed, drop off the assault team unnoticed, get in, get our guys out. That's our main mission. Because of the constant shortage of armored vehicles, Ukrainians use Spartans for everything: troop transport, fire support, supply runs, and medevac. And that's where one of the Spartan's biggest strengths and weaknesses comes into play: its size. On the plus side, being small and nimble makes you harder for Russian drones to spot and hit. It's also way easier to hide than, say, an old Soviet APC. Case in point. One of its advantages is that you can tuck it under a tree and you're covered. These days, with all the enemy's aerial recon, the name of the game is hide, hide, and hide again. But with small armored vehicles comes one big, glaring downside: limited interior space. That means less comfort for the crew and fewer troops in the back. The base Spartan is built for 7 people total, including the crew. But leave it to Ukrainian engineers to have their own ideas about field upgrades.
Її недоліком основним вважалося, що та вона ж не містка.
One of its main drawbacks was supposed to be its limited capacity. Take a look at what the 24th Brigade did. They fully rebuilt it, and now it's a stadium in here. There's loads of space. Wow, sounds impressive. But do these upgrades actually hold up in combat? Not just on paper? Before we answer that, your subscription tells YouTube our channel is worth watching. Tap subscribe to support us.
Чи бувало вивозили
When we were pulling guys out from a position, we could fit 12, even 13 people. On the way back, there's no gear inside, so you pack them in like Tetris. In Ukraine, the Spartan has picked up another critical role: medical evacuation. It's a mission where every second counts, and getting a wounded soldier to medics quickly can be the difference between life and death.
300-й важкий. І він
We had a recon guy, badly wounded, almost 6 feet 5 inches tall. We laid him down right here. We didn't even need to use the bench. Getting a casualty to the med station is not just about driving skill, and it's also a test of the vehicle's armor. Enemy drones, ambushes, RPGs, or even worse, anti-tank missiles can pop up at any moment. And this is where the Spartan shows its biggest weakness: protection.
Якщо, знову ж таки, вже
The armor, it's aluminum. The idea is that the Spartan punches through fast, maybe takes a few hits and keeps moving. The front of the vehicle is its strongest angle. It's sloped to increase the chance of enemy rounds bouncing off instead of punching through. That's the theory anyway.
саме попереду в неї
The front armor is the strongest. The vehicle is rated to withstand 14.5 millimeter rounds from 200 meters away, and that's largely thanks to the angled front plate. If a shell explodes nearby, Spartan's armor is more than enough to protect the crew from the shockwave and deadly shrapnel. In one case, a Russian Lancet drone detonated right next to a Spartan, and when it kept moving, the Russians followed up with a mortar strike. The result? Dented armor, but the crew walked away unharmed.
машина ця відповідає, скажімо так, західним.
This vehicle meets Western standards. The most important thing is keeping the crew alive. If the machine gets taken out after that, well, that's just how it goes. But let's be real. If that Russian drone had hit square in the side, the story might have ended much worse. The same goes for most modern munitions with a serious warhead. Still need convincing? Let's rewind to the Gulf War. A British Challenger 1 accidentally fired on a friendly FV-103 Spartan. It happened at a distance where thermal sights couldn't clearly identify the target. 2 British soldiers were badly wounded. They got insanely lucky. Could have been much worse. Thankfully, the Spartan comes with life-saving systems for exactly these moments. And they actually work.
Бачите, є система вентиляції.
You've got the ventilation system here. There's lighting. There's also a fire suppression system. That lucky break in the Gulf War probably also had to do with the long range of the shot. Plus, the Spartan has a clever bit of engineering that adds protection up front. And it might surprise you. The engine and transmission themselves act as an extra layer of armor.
Але я думаю, що тут ще й плюс.
I think the transmission and engine help protect the commander and driver if a round hits the front. And here's another nice touch. The Spartan has storage boxes for all the tools and gear you might need during a mission, and even that can double as protection.
Одночасно з цим все, що лежить в цих коробках.
Everything in these little boxes can be used as extra armor. If you throw some wrenches in there, congratulations. You've got improvised ballistic plating, a small but very useful feature added by the engineers. External sensors mounted on the armor help the driver keep track of key system indicators while on the move.
Тому що коли механік водій виглядає...
When the driver pops out of the hatch, he can still monitor the readings: oil temperature, pressure, coolant levels, and so on. These 3 little lights right here signal any critical issues. But unfortunately, no vehicle is all upside. The biggest drawback of the Spartan is its age. Finding spare parts for this Cold War relic is no easy task. It takes some serious hunting across the globe.
просто позаглядати...
For the machines officially transferred by the UK, there aren't enough spare parts included. And for the ones bought by volunteers, spare parts should be there. At least that's what the sellers promise. To make up for the Spartan's age and weaknesses, every vehicle had to be upgraded and fitted with modern electronics.
Як ми бачимо, тут є бортова...
This one's got an onboard Harris communication system. It comes as part of the kit. Great brand, one of the best. Thanks to skilled Ukrainian hands and routine maintenance, these machines not only gained extra life, but became a lot more comfortable inside.
Вони з часом втрачають.
Over time, rubber seals lose their grip, so we gave this hatch a quick spray with silicone. Now it stays dry even in the rain. And in mobile defense operations, the Spartan's speed has been a real asset, allowing fast movement not just on paved roads but across muddy terrain, which makes up most of the front line. He can hit 60 miles an hour. Of course, it all depends on the terrain. If the road's full of potholes, sure, you'll feel it. But in extreme situations, it'll get you there. The suspension holds up. Ukrainian troops use the Spartan for fast raids, hitting Russian forces when they least expect it, and quickly taking over enemy positions. The vehicle's compact size makes it easy to conceal while its tracked platform allows for a stealthy approach. The road wheels are rubberized, and that's one of its perks. It's quiet, no metal clanging, and the tracks have rubber pads too, which helps reduce noise. But tracks also bring their own headaches. If the tension isn't set correctly, it can lead to breakdowns or even a complete halt. And that's not just a Spartan issue, it applies to any tracked vehicle. You need to keep an eye on the track tension. One British instructor gave us a tip. You can check it with your fist, because you don't always have a proper measuring tool with you in the field. The factory version of the FV103 Spartan comes with an L37 A17.62mm machine gun, mounted on the commander's hatch. But in an assault, that's about as useful as firing a pistol at a tank. That's why Ukrainian crews have upgraded it with a heavy-hitting Browning M2. Recognize that American classic? Click the link in the top right corner to learn more about its role in today's war. Mounting a Browning M2 on the Spartan is a bold but debatable decision. With the L37A1, you can fire from inside the vehicle. Not so with the Browning. People who've used it in combat say one of the big drawbacks is the lack of protection. You have to expose yourself to fire it. You can't operate it from inside. Reloading is also a challenge. Imagine doing that while dodging shrapnel or a buzzing Russian FPV drone. Eventually, you'll run out of rounds, and it happens fast. Then you've got to change the ammo box, which is no small task in combat. In peaceful European countries, the CVRT series is already heading into retirement. But in Ukraine, things are different. The shortage of equipment means anything that still runs is heading to the front line, even if it's over 50 years old. On today's battlefield, the Spartan isn't a dusty old veteran. It's an active-duty soldier. Its biggest strengths are speed and agility, ideal for getting troops in or wounded soldiers out. But its armor doesn't match up to other Western IFVs like the M113. And while you might want to add extra protection to the Spartan, the engine likely can't handle the extra weight. So if it were your call, which vehicle would you pick for the job? Spartan, M113, or BMP-1? Let us know in the comments. There was an explosion. Boom! And I saw not just a comrade or a fellow soldier, but my best friend being torn in half. He started splitting like a young birch tree. This Russian soldier lost his closest friend during an assault. But here's the twist. Both of them were fighting for Ukraine against their former compatriots. Sounds insane? It's not even rare. Dozens of Russian volunteers are fighting on Ukraine's side. Some of them, former Wagner Mercs and Storm Z fighters. This was the fine print on their old Russian contracts. When you sign the contract, it spells everything out. Desertion, disobeying, looting, drinking, or drugs leads to execution. If they ever get caught, best case scenario, a show trial in Russia. Worst case, a quiet bullet from the FSB. So what makes them risk everything to fight Putin's army? We're digging for the answer in this video. The Russian Volunteer Corps first appeared on Ukraine's battlefield back in 2022. These are Russians who chose to fight Putin's regime not with words, but with rifles. Most of them, civilians turned assault troops. They went through training and picked up one of the toughest jobs in the military, storming trenches and clearing buildings. Now they're fighting alongside Ukraine's armed forces on the hottest parts of the front. There aren't many of us. We've got one assault platoon, a second assault platoon, and the drone team. A task comes in, we do it. First platoon moves out, second follows, and we roll together. Hit that like button because it helps us share more first-hand stories from the soldiers holding the line right now. To be a stormtrooper means you're the first to hit the fight, wherever it starts. It's close combat, trench clearing, urban brawls. There's only one rule: keep moving forward until every last enemy is gone.
Yes.
In the RVC, there's one rule: never say no. Anyone who does doesn't stay in the RVC. That's what I love about it. Meanwhile, the Kremlin claims the Russian Volunteer Corps is just a TikTok fantasy cooked up for Ukrainian propaganda. But let's be real, those talking points don't stand up to the facts. Take this guy, call sign Kant. He used to be a cook in Belgorod. Now, he's storming Russian positions for Ukraine. Right now, he's recovering from serious wounds after a combat op. And just so we're clear, he's already been on 27 missions with the Russian Volunteer Corps.
Вообще, раньше у меня было 27.
Back then, I said I'd done 27 missions, but really that number was off. I didn't fully understand the difference between just going out and a proper assault. So actually it's 18. Out of those, we liberated several villages. One of them was a town. That one's on my record too. During Kant's very first combat mission, his group walked right into a Russian ambush. They were moving in a convoy, military armor mixed with civilian pickups, when suddenly the whole thing lit up.
Не знаю, смотрю в заднее зеркало, вот так вот водитель.
I'm looking into the rearview mirror and see this Mitsubishi Pajero behind us. Boom, a mine lands dead center under its back wheels. The whole thing flies up sideways, flips back down onto its tires. I saw it all like in an American movie. What followed was chaos, gunfire everywhere. It was nearly impossible to tell who was who. Bullets and shrapnel were tearing through the air above their heads. Kant got out of the kill zone unscathed. But not everyone was that lucky. Some of his teammates were killed on the spot. One infantryman survived. Barely.
Всё, я увидел, короче, тупо американцы.
Everyone in the vehicle was KIA except one guy. He was just about to jump in when the mine went off. His legs flew one way and the rest of him another. But somehow, he made it. The next assault Kant took part in went much better. While clearing a village, he suddenly ran into a Russian elite assault group who were completely disoriented and stumbled right into his line of sight.
Вдоль речки идут 8.
Out of the corner of my eye, I see this squad of 8 or 9 Russians walking along the riverbank. Turns out it was 9 of them. They're in full frog skin camo, crossed grenade rigs on their chests, AK-12s, AKTKs. Lots of gear. I spot them, they spot me, and they hit the dirt. The odds weren't exactly in his favor, so Kant tried a different tactic, mind games. As they ducked into the foliage, he started yelling commands.
Падаю, прижимаю к себе автомат.
I hit the ground, hugging my rifle for dear life. I'm literally shaking, and I yell, "You bastards, surrender. It's over. There's so many of us. You've got no chance. You're done." I'm lying there thinking, what now? But empty words only go so far on the battlefield, so Kant decided to back up the bluff with bullets. He started firing into the spots where he figured the Russians would be hiding. And he was dead on.
Убегать. И я принимаю решение.
I decided to go for it. Rolled out, fired from prone, aiming at the places I would have taken cover myself. Then I hear them screaming, so I dump the whole mag in that direction. Next thing I hear is, "We surrender, stop shooting." The result? A stash of fresh trophy weapons for the RVC, including AKs and pistols that are now being used against the Russian side. But let's not pretend that kind of outcome is normal. In offensive operations like this, surrender is the rare exception, not the rule. Hit the subscribe button if you appreciate such stories. It tells YouTube that our content is worth sharing and helps us grow. A fighter with the call sign Mogila and his platoon of Russian volunteers were breaking through Russian defenses in southern Ukraine. Putin's army had built up 3 fortified lines there. Every yard was a battle, and the fighting looked like hell. The assault starts. As the guys are moving in, there's just this swarm of FPV drones. I've never seen shit like that. Like 20 of them, all flying and blowing up right next to you. That kind of storm inevitably led to heavy casualties among the Russian volunteers. Some never made it back. There were 8 of us in the group. Everyone got hit, 300s except me. One of us got killed. Yeah, KIA. He was the first one to jump into the trench. And it didn't end there. Another soldier was hit and critically wounded. His life hung by a thread. At the last moment, he managed to radio in his position, but with one small problem. I thought stuff like this only happened in movies. The guys on the radio yelling, "I'm dying, come get me, I'm bleeding out, I'm gonna black out, I'm here." The guys went looking for him, but he was somewhere else. His team tried to reach him, but it was too late. He'd gone dark on the radio. They only found him the next day. Turns out, while pulling back, he took a different route. He used a destroyed vehicle as a landmark, but there was another wrecked vehicle just like it behind the tree line. This mission also marked the first time RVC fighters encountered white phosphorus shells. These munitions are banned under the Geneva Conventions. They don't just wound with shrapnel, they can cause gruesome burns and even melt lungs if inhaled. Everyone got hit. No water, no nothing. We were under artillery fire. I got hit with phosphorus for the first time. But the worst part? Watching your wounded comrades desperately need an evac, knowing there's no way to get them out. The terrain was wide open and enemy fire was relentless. Every vehicle turned into a moving bullseye. Riding inside felt like sitting on a barrel of gunpowder with a lit match. I call into command on the radio. We've got a critically wounded man. We need an evac ASAP. But there's a problem. Between us and the vehicle is a mile of terrain where it can't move because of anti-tank mines and guided missiles. Even with everything stacked against them, RVC assault troops never dropped their weapons. They kept fighting, even though every mission felt like a one-way ticket. You're basically walking into death. There's a 99% chance you won't come back. 99%. One of the hardest missions came when RVC troops helped the Ukrainian armed forces hold the flanks near Avdiivka. They were covering the withdrawal of main forces under fire. The Russians were trying to encircle Ukrainian brigades, and they weren't holding back on ammo or manpower. We had orders to eliminate the enemy and secure positions near the coke plant. I was the first to dismount from the Bradley. We moved along the railway tracks. A fighter with the call sign Ivar was covering his fellow soldiers with a machine gun. His task was to suppress Russian fire so the assault team could reach the trenches and establish control without facing heavy resistance. I was the second gunner on the machine gun. We took up a firing position and started covering the entry of the first group into the trenches. We opened fire on Russian positions. Then the mortar barrage started. In response, the Russians launched a mortar attack. They had no shortage of ammo and pounded the area relentlessly. One round landed near my left leg. It flipped me over. I started shouting that I was a 300. I put a tourniquet on myself, felt a sharp pain in my left leg. To save Ivar's life, his teammates started dragging him out of the red zone. But it wasn't easy. The pre-sighted mortars kept hitting all around, and any one of them could have been the next casualty. They dragged me through the dirt. I tried crawling too, 5 meters to the Bradley. Then I collapsed face first into the ground, completely drained. The shelling got so intense that the blast kept creeping closer with every step. In such moments, even being near another person becomes deadly. You have to keep a distance to avoid both being hit by a single mortar. So the infantry had to pull back and try to suppress Russian forces, possibly moving into the sector. The guys moved deeper into the tree line, away from the vehicle, because the shelling didn't stop. They yelled, "Ivar, you've got 5 meters to crawl." I think I lay there for 15 seconds to pull myself together. Then the gunner yelled, "Come on, Ivar, you got this." I got on all fours and crawled to the vehicle. Thanks to sheer willpower and brutal training, Ivar didn't lose his head and survived the front line. In the Russian Volunteer Corps, all recruits go through basic training run by assault troops who've been under fire themselves. Meanwhile, some units in Putin's army are trained based on manuals that feel ripped straight from a Rambo movie. And those who've lived through it say it's no joke. Here's how a former fighter from Wagner remembers his training. You're sitting in a lecture about sapper work or navigation. Suddenly a grenade flies in through the window. If you don't react in time, too bad. You're a 300. That's what our training looked like. Some recruits couldn't take the physical and mental pressure and tried to escape from the training camps. But they had no idea what brutal punishment awaited them if they were caught. People tried to run away during training, but what's the point? Civilians would help hunt them down. Within a few hours, those guys were already tied up in a shed, completely beaten. Then they'd be taken away and zeroed out. After the failed mutiny by the Wagner leader, Russia disbanded the private army made up of mercenaries and ex-convicts. In its place, the Ministry of Defense created a new unit, Storm Z, fully controlled by the Kremlin. And if you thought their training would be any better, just listen to what one former infantryman witnessed. During a sudden stop, the tank's automatic firing system went off. It's set by default to shoot. So the tank stops, fires around, and it hits straight ahead. Kills 4 high-ranking officers, just like that. Why did this happen? The answer is pretty obvious, a mix of ass-kissing, negligence, and rock-bottom standards. But the problems didn't stop there. Instead of investigating and punishing those responsible, the Russians did what they do best, covered it up. And to be fair, they did it in a very original way.
Этот танк на следующий день утопили в реке.
That tank was sunk in a river the next day. The guys who fired the shot tried to cover their tracks by literally dumping the tank into the water. And that was that. In just 2 days, Storm Z lost a T-72 and 4 senior officers. When it comes to leadership, Storm Z isn't much different from Wagner. Fear and brutality are their go-to tools for maintaining discipline.
Вообще, с точки зрения наказания, вообще...
Honestly, the punishments in Storm Z are pretty creative. Shooting through your ears, beatings with sticks, being thrown into pits. They did that to me too. This guy left his unit without permission to visit his parents. In a Western army, he'd face some sort of disciplinary action. But in Russia? That's a whole different ballgame. His commanders came up with a lesson he won't forget.
4 дня потом в яме...
They threw us into a pit, in the rain. No food, no clothes, nothing. That's it. So tell me, how do you think a soldier performs after that kind of training? Yeah, we're skeptical too. Storm Z recruits are mostly ex-cons. Their top priority isn't fighting for Russia, it's getting out of prison. The plan? Finish basic training, get deployed, and then bail at the first chance. Problem is, it's tough to make a run for it when bullets are flying overhead.
Точки соприкосновения там 100 или 120.
At the front, 100 to 120 people were killed in just 8 hours. I saw it with my own eyes. 20 guys show up. Enemy opens fire, they panic and scatter. Some of them literally ran into minefields. Wagner wasn't much better. First, commanders told the convicts they'd stay behind the lines. In reality, they threw them straight into meat grinder assaults. Any hesitation was met with a simple choice: follow orders or die trying.
Мясо шли просто вперед и все, у нас не было.
We were just meat for the grinder. There was no such thing as retreat. You disobeyed, you were a 0. Step back, you were a 0. And 0 meant a bullet. One guy started questioning things, so they sent him to the front and just shot him. These tactics go back a long way, straight to World War II. When the Soviet front was collapsing under the German offensive, Stalin's officers were ordered to hold the line at any cost. That even included public executions of deserters to set an example. Fast forward 80 years and nothing's changed. Same army, same methods.
У нас было 2 дезертира, которые...
There were 2 deserters who refused to follow an order. One of them came back to base, dug his own grave, then they executed him. That's modern-day motivation in the Russian army, cash and fear. But this doesn't work on the Russian volunteer corps. These guys are driven by something else entirely, ideals and conviction.
Идеалисты, которые понимают, что...
They're idealists. They're not here for money, documents, or some thrill-seeking war tourism. They came to fight, to stand against everything coming from the east. They're fighting not just to defend Ukraine, but to bring the war back to Russia. To them, this isn't just about reclaiming Ukrainian land, it's about freeing their own homeland too. They believe the only language the Kremlin understands isn't peace talks, it's automatic fire from a Kalashnikov.
Украину, за свободу Украины.
First and foremost, RVC fights for Ukraine's freedom. That's our mission. Step 1. The goal is a Ukrainian victory on Ukraine's terms. But for many of these volunteers, the war doesn't end at the front line. Their next mission is justice, to find and prosecute every individual responsible for war crimes.
Хотели, чтобы в дальнейшем запустился.
We want to see real justice, tribunals, reparations, and accountability for everyone on the Russian side involved in this war. The ultimate goal of the RVC isn't military, it's political. They want to change the entire system inside Russia. Because if nothing changes, if the same authoritarian machine stays in power, then it's only a matter of time before another war begins.
Страны Российской Федерации.
The next step is dismantling the current Russian regime. Completely, a full purge, total deconstruction of the system. And it's not just Russians fighting for Ukraine, volunteers from all over the world are here. Who should we cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and we'll pick the most liked ones for our next story.
Hundreds of former American soldiers are traveling to Ukraine to fight against Russia. However, this brutal war is unlike any conflict the US military has faced before.
Fighting here, I mean, you're really having to worry about things that you never had to worry about in Iraq and Afghanistan. You're having to worry about drones, airplanes, helicopters. There's enemy tanks and BMPs that are firing at you at pretty much most engagements here.
So what's pulling these people thousands of miles away from home to a war in Ukraine? John, a commander in Ukraine's International Legion, shares his thoughts.
We have representatives from virtually every continent in the world here, which just goes to show you how many people are in support of Ukraine against Russia.
Russia spends billions of dollars trying to discredit both Ukrainian soldiers and American volunteers. It falsely labels the latter as mercenaries and accuses their Ukrainian brothers-in-arms of stealing Western aid. But do the people who have actually been on the battlefield, not just watched it on TV, agree with this narrative?
That I spent almost 2 years here, and I never saw an American Abrams tank disappear due to corruption. I never saw an artillery piece disappear due to corruption. That it's impossible to just put one of those in your pocket and disappear with it to sell it on the black market.
Most of these fighters are US military vets who've seen action in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've served in the world's most powerful army, and now they're putting that experience to work in Ukraine. And here's what they say sets this war apart.
And I think it gets brought up in every single interview, but like, there weren't drones in Afghanistan. We had drones, we had Predator drones and stuff, but the enemy didn't have drones. And there certainly weren't FPV drones buzzing around, which are the bane of my existence a lot of the times.
Another stark difference is the sheer intensity of this war. The front lines are constantly shifting, and the Russians attack using every type of conventional weaponry in overwhelming quantities. Here's what a former American sniper who fought in Ukraine's International Legion thinks about it.
This isn't fighting an insurgency here like it is in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's fighting an actual uniformed army that has an air force, that has a navy, that has artillery support and tanks, armored vehicles, stuff like that.
Smash that like button if you respect the unbreakable determination of American veterans fighting under these extreme conditions. Units made up of American volunteers have been crucial in bolstering Ukraine's combat capabilities. They work on the front lines, side by side with local battalions and brigades. From the very start of the full-scale invasion, they've been part of some of the toughest missions. Take Marine John's first combat operation near Kherson. His group had to cross a river to capture a small settlement. For a Marine, that might sound routine, but for John, it was a whole new challenge.
Our task was to gain a foothold in one of the small village just across this small river. The U.S. Marines are touted as being an amphibious assault. I've never done an amphibious assault. I fought in the desert. I suddenly come over to Ukraine and I'm getting thrown into a Zodiac and told to go do an amphibious assault on a small village, and I'm like, cool.
The river crossing was just the beginning. Russian artillery gave them a brutal welcome.
We actually got pinned down by a lot of our Russian artillery at the time because that was when they had more shells than citizens. And so for about 12 hours we were being shelled, and that was my first time ever being shelled by artillery.
When the shelling stopped, John's group made their move across the river, only to face another challenge.
And then we ended up having to swim out because the boats that we were using got popped. Threw our kit inside of a Zodiac that was half inflated, and we got in the water and we dredged about 1.5 kilometers back up river, and then hiked out for another 1 or 2 kilometers before we got picked up.
The grit and resilience of John's team deserves major respect. Despite every challenge, they pressed on and completed their mission successfully.
Although we got shelled, we actually scared the Russians, and the forces they had forced them to go into this one building, which later that afternoon was struck by a HIMARS, which they had just shown up maybe a month and a half prior to that.
John's group came out of this engagement without any casualties, showcasing a masterclass in professionalism. And the Russians, let's just say their day didn't end well.
I think it was somewhere between 50 and 150 guys were inside that building, they say.
We'll leave the rest to your imagination. The result of this operation? A liberated Kherson. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heroic stories from the Russian-Ukrainian war. The US Army has the planes, missiles, and support to dominate the skies and protect its infantry from unexpected attacks. In this war, however, Russia still holds an advantage in the air over Ukraine. This allows them to drop bombs directly on sectors with Ukrainian troops. Here's how an American soldier recalls his encounter with Russian aircraft.
Bakhmut fighting was very, very interesting. You know, being attacked by tanks and aircraft, attack helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, stuff like that was something that was just very new, and it just stood out of just how different the warfare is here compared to what I'd previously experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Beyond planes, the Russians have combat drones, something the US never faced in previous conflicts.
Drones, obviously. They have been the biggest change, and it's something that I've seen, like yourself, seen evolve from a single DJI Maverick Pro sitting in the air, freaking, a click away, just zoomed in, and they're just correcting artillery, to now we have FPVs, bomber drones, and we have a flamethrower drone now, which is terrifying.
In just 3 years of full-scale war, drones on both sides have evolved to the point where they can almost replace individual soldiers. Machine gunners, sappers, you name it. 10 years ago, the idea of drones being mass-produced and deployed in such numbers on the battlefield would have seemed like science fiction. Now, it's the reality.
Now we also have ground drones that have guns mounted on them, or they're suicide ground drones that have a TM62 mine inside of it, and they're just ready to roll in and dump into a blindage somewhere.
After arriving in Ukraine, American soldiers found themselves in some of the deadliest battles, where their lives often hung by a thread. This soldier recalls feeling relatively safe and comfortable in Afghanistan. In Ukraine, those feelings vanished within the first days on the front lines.
Because I knew that we had the superiority there. I knew that if I got injured, well, you could count on a UH-60 Blackhawk flying in and medevacing you out if you were in somewhere remote, or something bad happens. You are going to get taken back to a relatively safe place with higher medical care. There's absolutely no guarantee of that kind of thing happening in Ukraine.
While stationed in Bakhmut, John's group encountered Wagner mercenaries for the first time.
We had friendly Ukrainian forces in front. We were setting up a secondary line. About an hour into us setting that up, the primary line collapsed. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know if they were all wiped out, if they ran away, if they were over. We just don't know. All we know is headquarters came on the radio and said, "You're the zero line now. The 4 positions in front of you are gone." Okay. Then we got drone confirmation that there were Wagner forces heading towards us.
The Americans quickly took strategic positions and prepared to make the first move.
And in particular, there were about 2 or 3 guys going into this one building that we had interlocking fields of fire on. So every one of us were just like, that building over there? Right. And so I'm behind my machine gun. Everybody else has got their weapons trained on this one building. And we're looking, and one of them popped their heads out.
The Wagner group proved to be a formidable opponent. They had solid equipment, combat experience, and strong motivation to fight. The Russian PMC turned out to be more formidable than the regular armies the Americans had fought in the past.
Even, Marines before me, older Marines, went and cleared areas like Fallujah, for example. They cleared every single room and building of that very large city. That was before I got there. And that was something that was similar to Bakhmut, but the enemy did not have tanks or artillery or aircraft. They had IEDs and some AKs and stuff like that. And it wasn't like a uniform.
If you want to dive deeper into the Wagner Group's brutal tactics and how they lost 20,000 soldiers in Bakhmut, click the link in the top right corner. We've got a video covering their fights with both Ukrainians and American soldiers. Another challenge for American volunteers was that Ukrainian resources were always limited, while the enemy kept up relentless pressure. They had to go into battle with outdated equipment because modern gear was either scarce or entirely unavailable.
That was something that was very interesting to come here and see that almost nobody has night vision capabilities.
Take Marine John, for example. He found himself using a Soviet-era PKM machine gun for the first time. After some quick training, he successfully deployed it in combat.
The PKM got a really good rate of fire. It's really accurate up to, around, I was able to plug targets, like window-sized targets, at about 700, 750 meters. The only real complaint that I have about the PKM is the fact that it doesn't have a disintegrating belt.
As we've mentioned, the most harrowing part of this war is the intensity of the fighting. The enemy has the upper hand in both numbers and firepower. Tragically, this has led to some highly experienced American volunteers being surrounded and captured.
We did manage to evade the enemy, trying to make our way back home on foot for about 8 hours.
With 12 years of combat experience in the US Army, including, Alexander came to Ukraine to help. He was captured and spent 3 grueling months in captivity, losing 31 pounds during that time. We can't discuss the details due to YouTube's policies, but the fact that Alexander Druk survived it all is nothing short of miraculous.
We were put in a lot of stress positions that, honestly, some of those are worse than the punches.
Unfortunately, not every American volunteer is as lucky as Alexander to return home. Some pay the ultimate price in the fight for freedom.
Major task is tracking down wounded foreigners and killed foreigners and making sure they get evacuated home and get treated, or make sure the remains go to the parents or the family members with honor. Because as it stands right now, when an American is wounded or killed, our government's really not doing anything to help.
Former Green Beret David Bramlett is working with a foundation that helps coordinate all these efforts. His mission deserves the highest respect. Ukrainians deeply value the sacrifice of every American soldier and go out of their way to show gratitude to their families. They raised and sent $60,000 to the mother of a fallen American soldier as a gesture of support. Ukrainians understand better than anyone the terrible price of freedom. Because for Russia, the borders of other countries are just arbitrary lines to be crossed at will. Looking at a map, it's clear Russia is much closer to the US than many might think, and they've provoked America multiple times. For American volunteers, fighting in Ukraine is not just about helping an ally. It's about preparing to protect their own homeland from a potential future threat.
It's only a few kilometers, and Russia is known for sending nuclear-capable bombers into our airspace. That, they do this sometimes.
One US Army veteran summed up his motivation to join Ukraine's fight perfectly.
If we don't wake up and support the Ukrainians in their hour of need, then we will be on the wrong side of history, and we will end up having that fight here, but not with our votes and money. It'll be with tanks and bombs and guns here.
Imagine a T-90 tank rolling through Texas, firing on homes. These American volunteers are doing everything they can to ensure that nightmare never becomes a reality. They aim to stop Russia and empower Ukrainian soldiers, learning invaluable combat lessons in return. So, what do you think? If Russia isn't stopped in Ukraine, how soon will they set their sights on the US? A year? 3 years? Maybe 10? Share your thoughts in the comments. How long the machine gunner lives is how long the squad lives. This isn't Browning M2's first war, but in the trenches of the Russia-Ukraine war, this hellish machine has become a key factor in turning the tide of battles. When the machine gun is firing, you don't dare raise your head, even if you're Rambo. A trained machine gunner is a nightmare for the enemy. So why does this 90-year-old American machine gun remain the best in the world? Well, Ukrainian soldiers have some answers for you. This gun only jams under 2 conditions: if it's filthy and unlubricated, or if it's completely worn out. The Browning M2 can take out Soviet-era armor used by the Russians. It's an incredibly powerful weapon. When this baby gets going, it's terrifying. But seeing is believing, right? These guys know what they're talking about. The American machine gun saved their lives when they found themselves in a tight spot. One morning, a radio call came through. 2 Russian BMPs packed with assault troops were headed straight for their position. The Ukrainian soldiers' position was considered impenetrable, but that morning it was still dark, and thick fog blanketed the area. To make things worse, the blanket covering the Browning M2 had frozen solid to the metal. Luck seemed to be on the Russian side, but only for a moment. The machine gunner managed to rip off the frozen cover and then opened fire into the darkness. I was aiming based on sound and instinct, the soldier shared. The rest, as they say, is history. It's worth mentioning that the Browning M2 roars louder than thunder. At 150 decibels, this beast can disorient anyone without proper protection. That's why hearing protection is essential when firing it. But in combat, as we've seen, that's not always an option. As the Russian BMPs crept closer, the machine gunner could see their silhouettes, illuminated by the sparks flying off the impacts. The vehicle sputtered to a halt. Assault troops began jumping out and running. They shouted over the radio, "Reload, they're running!" The attack was repelled, and thanks to the Browning M2, the defenders came out on top. Importantly, despite the intense use, the machine gun never jammed. This weapon is unbelievably reliable. For infantry holding the line in trenches, the Browning M2 is the last hope. When bad weather grounds FPV drones, or poor visibility renders anti-tank systems useless, the sheer storm of hundreds of 12.7mm rounds can stop any light armored vehicle in its tracks. But have you seen what happens when a BMP catches fire and then explodes? The secret lies in the 12.7 by 99mm ammunition, and we're about to reveal it. One of the Browning M2's greatest strengths is the wide range of ammunition it can use. It was long believed that Ukraine was supplied with only 2 types of rounds for this weapon, but it turns out there are at least 12, like the Apostles. So, the Browning M2 and its 12 Apostles. Look closely. Each type is marked with a different color tip, but one of these Apostles is truly extraordinary and extremely rare. Enter the Mark 211 round. Features an armor-piercing tungsten core and an incendiary compound inside. Upon penetrating the armor, the round detonates, spreading the incendiary material inside. Typically, only artillery systems use such destructive ammunition, and those are in much larger calibers. The Mark 211, however, delivers the destructive power of a 20mm cannon shell right out of a machine gun. Did you know there are machine gun rounds with explosive power? Hit like if you did. Congrats, you've passed the Browning M2 theory exam and are ready for the practical test. If you didn't, hit like anyway, because now you're officially in the class. By the way, the Mark 211 round is also wildly popular for sniper work with the Barret rifle, because this machine gun can also be used as a sniper weapon. Here's how. You take the machine gun, attach a Picatinny rail, mount a scope, and voila. We just switch it to long range mode. The Browning M2 was first used for sniper-style shooting by American forces. Its effective range is 2,200 yards. But during the Vietnam War, U.S. Marine sniper Carlos Hathcock turned his Browning M2 into a sniper rifle, setting a record that lasted until 2002 by hitting a target at 2,460 yards. With a fire rate of up to 635 rounds per minute, the Browning M2 delivers a storm of fire no sniper could match. Here's what happens when a group of soldiers walks into an ambush set by an M2 machine gunner. These Russian soldiers didn't stand a chance, as the machine gunner delivered precision fire. But the Browning M2 also allows you to fire accurately at targets you can't even see. Here's what that looks like. Indirect fire is when you shoot based on coordinates and azimuth. You don't see the enemy, and they don't see you. It's practically an artillery technique. The bullets arc over obstacles and hit the target directly. Now imagine that precision with a burst of dozens of rounds. The technique is impressive, but requires mastery of optics and complex calculations, not something every soldier can handle. Another standout round in this war is the one with the red tip, a tracer round. But wait, doesn't it reveal the machine gunner's position? Why risk firing tracer rounds if it could invite a counterstrike? The Browning M2 weighs 84 pounds, plus the tripod, and then there are the ammo boxes, each weighing 35 pounds. Carrying all this and switching positions every 2 to 3 minutes is no small feat. even with a strong and tireless assistant. But here's the thing, without tracer rounds, it's hard to imagine nighttime hunting. For drones. Every night, the Russians launch dozens, sometimes hundreds, of Shahed kamikaze drones over Ukraine, targeting critical infrastructure. And every night, Ukrainian crews head out on combat patrols. The intensity is really high right now. Air raid alerts go off daily, and there's a huge number of enemy UAVs over Ukraine. In flight, the Shahed drones emit a distinct buzzing sound, but shooting at them based solely on sound isn't practical. They're small and hard to hit. So first, the crew sky using thermal imaging. In the thermal scope, it looks like a red dot moving across the screen. Once the target is identified, they mark it with a laser designator. Target eliminated. Taking down a single drone often requires at least 100 rounds, an entire box of ammo. Reloading takes precious time, so the Ukrainians came up with a clever solution. We modified the ammo box to hold 200 rounds instead of 100. It's much more efficient. The crew typically arrives at the position in a vehicle, with the Browning M2 mounted on a tripod. In the turret? That doesn't seem to be standard issue either. This kind of weapon modification, battlefield experimentation, and technical innovation has become the norm in this war. Recently, Ukrainian National Guard troops managed to shoot down a cruise missile with a Browning M2. The target? An H-101, Putin's favorite missile, carrying nearly 900 pounds of explosives. Of course, this was an experiment, and success favored the gunners, as the missile flies at speeds of up to 620 miles per hour. But success tends to follow the best, doesn't it? So where else can this American gadget, capable of piercing 25mm armor and sometimes taking down missiles, be deployed? During World War II, Browning M2s were mounted on fighters and bombers. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress carried 13 M2s, while the record holder, Douglas A-26, could pack up to 14. But this war takes versatility to another level. The Browning M2 can be mounted on virtually anything, even dune buggies. Now take a look at this footage from an operation carried out by Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, HER. Russia was using this oil platform for military purposes, outfitting it with radar equipment to monitor the sea and airspace. That had to be addressed. 14 Sea-Force assault boats, each equipped with Browning M2 machine guns, stormed the target. Imagine 14 machine guns firing simultaneously. It's like a high-speed cavalry charge. Subscribe to our channel if you agree. By the way, this mission was deemed a success, despite Russian claims that the Ukrainian attack was drenched in blood. But as we say, seeing is believing. Browning M2s are also mounted on Island-class patrol boats and Navy 18 WP-class boats, supplied to Ukraine by the US and Estonia. It's not unlikely that we'll soon see the iconic Browning M2 machine gun mounted on Ukraine's famous naval drones. After all, Ukrainians recently equipped the robotic ground system droid TW-12.7 with this heavy hitter. This gadget can cover 9 miles and unleash a storm of suppressive fire on enemy positions while clearing the way for assault troops to land. It comes loaded with a 300-round ammunition capacity. For perspective, that's roughly the same amount of ammo carried by an assault trooper armed with a Kalashnikov or an assault rifle. However, the Browning M2 fires 50 caliber 12.7mm rounds, giving it the firepower to take out lightly armored vehicles with ease. It's hard to imagine a modern infantry fighting vehicle, IFV, or armored personnel carrier, APC, without a Browning M2 on board. Recognize this 14-ton beast? It's the Max Pro armored personnel carrier, complete with a machine gun turret on top. You might think being a machine gunner on an APC is easier. No heavy lifting for the gun or ammo. But what does this soldier think? On the move, you've got to control the turret joystick with one hand and fire with the other. It's not exactly easy. The joystick is sensitive. Turret speed and angle depend on the force applied, so the gunner needs to not only shoot on the move, but also skillfully maneuver the turret. Lives depend on it, because APC gunners operate at very close ranges. On the Max Pro, 200 to 300 yards is the norm for suppressing enemy infantry. And reloading? Forget about it. That's just too much. The mission for this crew is straightforward but dangerous. Approach enemy positions at high speed, suppress them with machine gun fire, and allow friendly infantry to either safely deploy or evacuate. However, safety in a firefight is a very relative term, so speed is everything. I fire until I'm empty, shout clear, and the driver spins us around and we get out fast. The adrenaline is off the charts. This guy has a tough job. Let's wish him good luck. But it seems the machine gunner on another American APC, the Striker, might feel a bit safer. Here's what his workstation looks like. This is the monitor, with day and night cameras. And here's the joystick for controlling the module and firing. The Striker's remote-controlled weapon system, loaded with 2,000 rounds, makes life easier. On top of that, the APC has side windows for infantry to fire from, offering additional firepower. The gunner's position is also protected by 14.5mm armor, giving them much-needed security. So yes, the Striker gunner has it a little easier compared to others. But here's a question for you. Where is it hardest to be a machine gunner? In a trench, a building, or an armored vehicle? Tell us in the comments.
Ready to work! You probably know that a precision shot is never just about pulling the trigger. It's about the scope, the shooter, the round, and random chaos around, like a frog jumping into the sight picture. All of it adds up. Even this tiny cushion plays its part. Usually the sniper picks the priority targets himself. For me, I'm only interested in the juicy ones, officers or RPG guys. Right, an RPG gunner kind of gives himself away. He's got the RPG, but how the hell do you spot a commander from a regular soldier at long range? It's actually not that hard to ID a commander, an officer, or a squad leader. Officers stand tall, regulars drop their heads when a commander walks up. Still, here's something that might surprise you. Dropping an enemy with a clean shot doesn't always mean you've succeeded. A sniper's real win is when his shot shifts the battlefield. Watch, you'll see how that works. But first, you recognize this chunky piece of gear? No? Maybe now? This is the Barret MRAD. In my opinion, it's the best sniper rifle we've got. MRAD stands for Multi-Role Adaptive Design. Back in 2012, the National Rifle Association of America named the Barret the best sniper rifle of the year. You might have seen it in John Wick, that scene where he gears up before the final shootout. This rifle was built for high-precision work at extreme ranges. It's got a folding, adjustable stock, and a trigger you can fine-tune. Exactly what a sniper needs. With this rifle, you can work from 1,000 to 1,650 meters. You can use .308 or .338, or even switch calibers. The range shifts depending on the ammo. This is where the Barret MRAD's main trick comes in. In under 2 minutes, you can turn one Barret MRAD into a completely different rifle, just by swapping the barrel and caliber. It's so simple, a kid could do it. Besides the standard .338 Lapua Magnum, the rifle supports multiple calibers and can be quickly reconfigured for different ammo. Ready for any range or mission on the battlefield. Impressive, but hold up. This isn't even the main Barret of this video. So why this whole zoo of calibers? Well, now's the time to dive a little deeper into the sniper world. A world as complex as professional boxing. Think weight classes plus a dozen federations. But in Ukraine, the sniper craft has evolved into something way more intricate. This war has brought about a third division of precision shooters, in addition to snipers and designated marksmen. And many NATO countries haven't even heard of it. Before we break it down, hit that like button. YouTube won't show this to others without your support. Thanks. So, first specialization, the sniper. Usually a scout shooter operating covertly from long range, either solo or in a pair. His job? Take out high-value targets. Officers, equipment operators, and also conduct recon and adjust fire. These are the guys you see in movies and war stories, and the Barret MRAD is a top pick for this role, but not the only one. I use a Ruger Precision with a TV scope. The Ruger Precision rifle is another American long-range precision rifle used in Ukraine. It's also available in multiple calibers, from .308 Winchester to 6.5 Creedmoor and .338 Lapua Magnum. Its big advantage? Full compatibility with AR platform accessories. That means the rifle can be easily customized to the shooter. We've already got a video where Ukrainian soldiers explain why they choose the AR platform, so we won't dive into that now. But if the RPR is all about affordable precision, there's also precision for the rich. That one will cost you around $10,000. This is the Finnish-made Sako TRG-42, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. My farthest shot was 1,200 meters, but it's capable of reaching 1,700 meters. This is the same rifle Canadian sniper Wally got for himself when he came to fight in Ukraine. Best advertising you could ask for, but the TRG-42 is rare on the battlefield, unlike American or British rifles. This is an Accuracy International multi-caliber rifle with interchangeable barrels for .308 and .338. Right now, it's chambered in .338, which I'm using. Max range is 1,500 meters, but with good skills, you can push it farther. This rifle is easily on par with the Barret. In the British Army, Accuracy International variants are known as the L119A3. With one of these, sniper Craig Harrison scored a confirmed hit at 2,475 meters. With Accuracy International in .308, you're effective up to 700 meters, but a good shooter can stretch it to 1,000. Chances are, reps from these manufacturers are constantly in Ukraine, gathering feedback and improving their weapons.
Thank you, free world.
But it's not just one way. Ukrainians, as they gain experience, are also improving their own weapons. I'm using a Brugger and Tomet rifle chambered in .338, manufactured in Ukraine under license by Tactical Systems. But our unit uses different platforms and everyone has to master them. All of these excellent rifles have one thing in common. They're bolt action. That means manually cycling the bolt after every shot. Feels a bit ancient, no? The thing is, among pros, it's a given. Automatic systems reduce accuracy. That's why almost all high-precision rifles are bolt action, which is where marksmen come in, the second division of the sniper world. You'll see why. This isn't one of those hold your breath, line up the shot moments. No, you've got to go bang, 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 and just stuff the enemy full of lead. A designated marksman is embedded with a squad or platoon. He's there to suppress targets at mid-range, 300 to 600 meters, sometimes closer. Shortest shot I've ever made? 26 meters. In 90% of firefights, you're not shooting from a comfy prone position. You're in a tree or propped up on backpacks or behind a barricade. Terrain, vegetation, it all forces you to adapt. Now imagine a marksman sprinting through the forest with a 5 to 7 kilogram bolt action rifle, trying to lay down rapid fire. Not gonna work. Urban combat, short range fights again. So what's the best tool? In close quarters, nothing beats a semi-auto UAR in .308. It's super comfortable to run it indoors. That's the UAR-10, a semi-automatic rifle chambered in NATO standard 7.62 by 51 millimeter. It's basically Ukraine's version of the AR-10. Rotating bolt, gas-operated, same basic system. You can fire it all day long. It stays accurate, consistent, one of the best rifles we've got. Your subscription tells YouTube our channel is worth watching. Tap subscribe to support us. The marksman's job is simple. Pull the trigger and swap mags, over and over in brutal close-quarters battles. In Bakhmut, the gray zone was sometimes just 30 to 60 meters wide. The Russians came in waves. Ukrainian snipers went wild. We crushed it in Bakhmut. We'd fire 150 rounds a day. UAR-10 has an effective range of 800 to 1,000 meters and a max of 1,200. It weighs 4.1 to 5.5 kilograms and uses 10 or 20 round mags. That place was covered in bodies. They didn't even collect their dead when you don't just dump them in pits. Hard to imagine, but we promised a third division. And here it is, anti-materiel snipers. These guys shoot 50 BMG or 14.5 by 114 millimeter rounds. In Ukraine, they've become their own category with separate training. They hit targets at 2,200 to 2,400 meters and deliver suppressive fire at 3,000 meters. On the battlefield, they've proven brutally effective. In this league, the Barret M82 is king. In U.S. Army manuals, it's known as the M107. First off, it's a semi-auto 50 caliber. You can literally set stuff on fire with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. MTLBs, BTRs, it punches right through. The legendary American anti-material rifle basically handheld artillery. The 50 BMG is a monster round, originally made for anti-aircraft machine guns. One shot can punch through light armor, hit from 1.8 kilometers, and the record is over 2.5 kilometers. Even an off-target shot can do major damage. These rounds can detonate explosives. The same ammo feeds the M2 Browning, another American war legend. But the Barret M82 isn't the only handheld cannon in Ukraine. Check this out, the Horizon's Lord, a multi-caliber, multi-role rifle designed by a Ukrainian company. It weighs 17 kilograms, and when extended, it's nearly 1.8 meters long. It might be the biggest sniper rifle in the world. This specific rifle was built for extreme range shooting. It even has a custom round, 12.7 by 114 millimeters. Horizon's Lord holds the record for longest confirmed kill, 3,800 meters. The bullet took 9 seconds to reach the target. It was a Russian officer. Another heavy hitter is the Snipex Alligator, firing 14.5 by 114 millimeter rounds, originally used in KPVT machine guns. It's effective at 2,200 to 2,400 meters. Accuracy is tied to weight. The lighter the gun, the less stable the shot. That's why 25 kilograms doesn't bother the military. That's the upper weight limit for carry. Extreme long-range shooting is complicated. It's math. A sniper needs patience, discipline, and a touch of nerd. In our field, there are formulas for wind, angular movement, all kinds of stuff. That's why Ukraine is creating a new category, long-range anti-materiel operators. So how's the Russian side doing? Typical infantry snipers in the Russian army still use the SVD or SVDS. The Dragunov SVD is the most common sniper rifle across the former Soviet bloc. It's outdated but still usable in today's battlefield, especially when upgraded. Ukrainian units often modernize it with new optics. Effective range is about 800 meters. Not bad for a marksman rifle. But honestly, in our unit, if you're handed an SVD, it means you messed up. It's a punishment rifle. Probably the same story in Russia. Good shooters get Western-style rifles just like Ukrainians do. Still, the Russian army recently adopted modern sniper rifles. The CV98, updated ASVK-M, Cord M, Vintorez M, and others. Should we do a separate video about Russian sniper rifles? Or is there another topic you want covered? Comment below. The top like suggestion might be our next episode. Even the best planned assault is a step into the unknown. Under extreme stress, the human brain defaults to its primal settings, fight or flight. But after countless drills, assault troops are left with only one mode, fight. Flight is only possible after the job is done. And then you can finally enjoy the moment and waste some of that precious water. After such intense trainings, a soldier's weapon becomes part of their body, or maybe even their soul. Recognize this rifle? Yep, that's an AR-15, an American semi-automatic rifle family based on the Colt, AR-15 design or its clones. Tactical color, Step Frog. I use the AR system. I had this rifle even before the war started. But wait, why would a soldier pick a civilian AR-15 over an M16 or M4? The military issued rifles that came from the same Armalite AR-15 blueprint. There are reasons. First, the US has supplied very few M4s and M16s. Second, AR-15s can be legally purchased both in Ukraine and abroad. And third, I built this rifle to fit me. It's ready for any mission in extreme conditions. Hold on, built it? The AR-15 was created back in the 1950s by Armalite, a company that designed weapons for the US military. So what does he mean? I installed a short upper receiver, changed the stock and grip, added a red dot sight, a laser, a flashlight, a suppressor. See, the AR-15 is a modular rifle. You can swap out nearly every part, and countless manufacturers worldwide produce custom components. But does all of this really matter? When you're in full gear or winter clothing, the stock needs to be shorter. When storming a building, a flashlight or strobe is a must. This red dot has a night vision mode. You can even install a custom trigger that fits your finger just right. In an assault, every single detail in a soldier's gear matters, right down to this string. That's not just a random piece of cord, it helps the soldier measure the distance they've moved away from friendly lines. The AR-15 is an incredibly flexible platform. Both the rifle itself and its components, accessories, and ammunition can be bought at civilian gun stores. However, the military-issue M4A1 carbine is a different story. You won't find it in Ukrainian gun shops. Only a limited number have been supplied by allies, but is there really such a big difference between the M4A1 and the AR-15? A quick way to tell them apart is the short barrel and the fixed front sight on the M4A1. You'll also see 5.56 by 45mm NATO engraved on the military carbine's barrel. But the real difference is inside. Check this out. The rifling twist rate of an M4A1 barrel is 1:7. That means the bullet makes one full rotation every 7 inches of barrel travel. This 1:7 twist is the standard for US military rifles and is considered the mil spec for 5.56 barrels. Why does this matter? NATO standard ammo includes tracer, armor-piercing tracer, and incendiary rounds. These have longer bullets that need a faster twist rate to stay stable in flight. Meanwhile, the AR-15 had a 1:14 twist, but today the sweet spot is 1:8. This setup lets you fire not only .223 Remington, but also standard 5.56mm rounds. That's why modern AR-15 barrels are chambered to handle both calibers. However, never fire 5.56 NATO ammo from a rifle chambered only for .223 Remington, unless it's specifically marked on the barrel. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a like. It helps more people find it. So the AR-15 gives you nearly unlimited options for customization. Of course, modding out your rifle can drive up the cost dramatically. In Texas, you might find a basic AR-15 on sale for $600. But a fully tricked out Great Terrace build, that'll set you back $3,500. Unlike its military counterpart, all AR-15s, no matter how tricked out, fire one shot per trigger pull. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it? In a close quarters assault, you often need a hail of bullets, not carefully aimed single shots. What does our brave warrior have to say about that? On combat missions, I often just swap my civilian upper receiver onto the lower receiver of a Colt M4A1, which has a full auto mode. Well, full auto fire burns through ammo fast. Even the toughest assault troops can't lug around an unlimited supply of magazines. That's why semi-auto remains the primary mode in battle. But having the option of full auto, that's pure psychological comfort. It might not be used often, but just knowing it's there, that's enough to warm the soul. So yes, automatic fire still matters. That's why in February 2023, the Ukrainian Armed Forces officially adopted the UAR-15, a select fire version of the AR-15, produced by a Ukrainian private manufacturer under an American license. The National Guard had already been using the UAR-15 before the full-scale invasion, making it far more common than the AR-15 or even the M4A1. The UAR-15 is standard issue in our brigade. This Ukrainian adaptation of the American rifle uses both Ukrainian and American parts. The barrel and trigger mechanism, which directly impact accuracy, are made in the US. Like its American cousin, the UAR-15 has a modular design, allowing soldiers to customize it for maximum comfort and efficiency. You can mount any accessories on this rifle, swap out the grip, the stock, the charging handle, whatever you want. The upper receiver and handguard feature Picatinny rails, so you can attach optics, lasers, and other tactical gadgets. In short, the Ukrainian AR-15 is nearly identical to the original, but how does it hold up in real combat? We have to warn you, what you're about to see may cause severe distress for gun enthusiasts. If you love firearms, you might want to take a deep breath. We're all about real-world testing here. Yeah, this is real-life stuff. Subscribing boosts the video in the algorithm. Please consider hitting that button. The reliability of an assault rifle isn't just a feature, it's the only thing that matters. Finding yourself in front of an enemy bunker with a jammed rifle? That's a nightmare scenario. That's why Ukrainian troops push their weapons to the limit. And as you'll see, the AR system holds up just fine. The AK-12 is a must-have at Red Square parades. Russia's newest 5.45 by 39mm rifle, it was supposed to be the ultimate upgrade to the legendary Kalashnikov platform, and yet Russian troops are constantly modifying it, patching flaws that have popped up throughout the war. Want to tell which version is which? Just look at the stock. It changes with every update. There are smaller tweaks too, but the stock is the most obvious sign that even Russian engineers aren't happy with the design. Since the early days of the invasion, captured AK-12s have been flooding into Ukrainian hands. After the battle for Kiev, they piled up in storage like old furniture. The biggest problem with the AK-12 is that none of its parts are interchangeable with older AK-74s or anything made by third-party manufacturers. If something breaks, forget about fixing it. Then there's the weird iron sight. If you're used to a classic AK-74, this one will feel like a bad joke. And the fire selector? It doesn't lock properly. Some soldiers say they got used to it and even prefer it over the AK-74s, but let's just say it's an acquired taste. People love saying AKs are easy to master, but are they? I don't think so. If you want real speed and precision, the AR system is much easier to control. And then there's the build quality. The AK-12 rust, yes, rust, like an old car abandoned in the rain. The metal coating is so bad that chipped and corroded parts are common. I've never seen a rusty AR, and it's not just the rifle, the ammo is a problem too. Even rounds from the same crate can produce wildly different accuracy results. But hey, at least ammo supply isn't an issue. Finding 5.45 times 39 rounds is way easier than getting NATO standard cartridges. So is everything Russian automatically bad? Not quite. The AK-12 has its pros and cons, but one thing is clear, it's not built for extreme conditions. That's why many Ukrainian assault troops still prefer Kalashnikovs, just not the AK-12. Instead, they go for the classic, battle-hardened AK-74. The only things I changed for comfort were the adjustable stock, pistol grip, handguard for better handling and attachments, and a flash hider. That's it. The AK-74 has earned the respect of millions of soldiers across multiple generations and countries, cementing its legendary status. It first saw action with Soviet forces during the 1979 invasion of Afghanistan, a war that turned into a nightmare for the Red Army. Rumor has it that the CIA paid $5,000 for the first captured AK-74 from the Mujahideen, just to get a closer look at the new Soviet weapon. Today, the AK-74 is the most common rifle on the battlefield. Its 5.45 by 39mm ammunition is widely available across all front lines, which, let's be honest, is often the biggest reason to choose it. Running out of ammo is every soldier's worst nightmare. For example, when we capture an enemy position, we often find sealed ammo crates. Once the engineers clear them, we can open them and use whatever's inside. But if you think a rifle magically jumps into a soldier's hands and takes out the enemy on its own, you're very wrong. A good assault trooper needs far more than just shooting skills. Above all, he needs to think clearly, which is nearly impossible in the heat of battle, and have the guts to keep numbered and alone. Look at this Ukrainian soldier. He was left alone but decided to finish the job anyway. For several minutes, he fired from different positions, then lobbed grenades at various angles, imitating a full assault team. The result? The Russians surrendered. But let's be real, maybe they just ran out of ammo. And then there's this other Ukrainian soldier who, alongside his comrades, held his position for 67 days while being completely surrounded. The only things that kept them alive? Courage, skill, and a whole lot of bullets. When they finally broke out, the area around his trench was littered with dozens of Russian corpses and multiple destroyed vehicles. But that's another story, one that definitely deserves its own video. Want more videos about firearms? Tell us what you're interested in. We'll make it happen. An assault trooper storming enemy...
It was definitely, a lot crazier, a lot more intense than any kind of op I'd been on before.
3 Canadian volunteers got their baptism by fire in eastern Ukraine, fighting alongside the 3rd Assault Brigade. Together with their Ukrainian brothers in arms, they held a city sector where the odds were 5-1 in Russia's favor. Risking their lives, the Canadians covered the withdrawal of friendly units under heavy fire. During the mission, they gained not just first-hand experience in urban combat, but also some serious injuries.
But the tourniquets, oh, the tourniquets hurt like a bitch. Those things just tighten on so much. I couldn't use both my arms. It's like I had like noodles for arms.
So what was the battle really like? The one that dragged on for a whole week? Let's hear it straight from the people who were there. When Russian forces broke through the defenses of Avdiivka, Ukrainian command began a gradual withdrawal to save the lives of its troops. To buy time, they sent in the 3rd Assault Brigade, along with the Canadian volunteers.
Our mission was to basically counterattack the Russians, hold them back so that the other Ukrainians could pull out of the encirclement.
We were getting ready. Some people were going to zero in their weapons.
The intensity of the fire was so overwhelming that even the 2nd and 3rd lines of defense were feeling the pressure.
Don't have this illusion if you're planning to go into a drone unit that, you know, because you're in a drone thing, you're safer because you become a prime target. They throw everything they have at you.
Before we dive into this gripping story, hit that like button to help this video reach even more people. The first stage of the mission was to get troops to the front line as fast as possible. For that, the Ukrainians deployed American M113s. Here's how one Canadian volunteer remembers the start of the operation.
The moment you load up into the M113, the door shuts and the ramp closes. And that's when it becomes real. You feel the vehicle move, and it's, yeah, we're going into combat, or we're going into a zone under fire.
As the old army saying goes, the waiting is worse than the fight. Even seasoned soldiers feel nervous at first, but once it starts, they kick into gear and fall back on years of training.
Yeah, the whole time you're just thinking, like wondering how you're gonna react when that ramp drops or if you come under contact.
At this point, it was like 3 in the morning, and we're thinking, no, when's this going to start? When's this going to start?
To reduce the risk of being spotted, the soldiers moved in under the cover of night. That doesn't guarantee safety from Russian drones, but it does improve the odds, even if just a little.
We didn't want to be going into the city when it was daylight because the road going into Avdiivka was getting tighter and tighter, very easy to shoot artillery on it, any other kind of fire support, so it was very risky going in.
But this war plays out practically in real time, and halfway down the road, a Russian recon drone spotted movement. The soldiers knew it was only a matter of minutes before the artillery would start.
Which, while we were driving to location, we were getting hit by, I don't know what it was exactly, it might have been a Dishka or something smaller, but you can hear rounds rattling off of the armor as we were getting close.
The Russians use a tactic called fire curtain. The goal is to wipe out everything in the area with overwhelming firepower. That night, the Canadians got the full experience, an uninterrupted storm of incoming fire from every direction. Subscribe to the channel to see more frontline realities and the weapons used in modern war.
My first experience, my first deployment, first assignment, it was like they mentioned, you couldn't probably count to 5 without having artillery or mortars or bombs or anything going off. It was constant. It was like an orchestra. You just kept going and going and going without stopping. Hrad would just pa 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 pa, getting closer and closer.
Staying in the M113 any longer would have been suicide. Russian FPV drones were already waiting for them. The soldiers dismounted, ahead of them, miles on foot, through some of the toughest battlefield conditions imaginable.
From where we get dropped off by the M113, it was about 4 kilometers of walking in, and we're walking on like kind of mud and snow, and it was definitely a little bit of exercise for sure, especially with the machine gun and all the ammo.
To stop Ukrainian reinforcements from reaching the sector, Russian jets began dropping heavy glide bombs from the sky.
And that, I remember we were walking for like half a day, and that was interesting because it was the first time I ever witnessed a glide bomb. I think it was a glide bomb. It was constant jets, constant artillery, constant mortars, but this thing it was strange.
For the Canadian volunteers, this moment was basically a second birthday. Not everyone gets to walk away when a guided aerial bomb detonates just a few yards away.
But you saw 2 wings and this thing, and it landed maybe like 30 meters away, 20, 30 meters away. And obviously you drop right away, but at this point I dropped kind of like on my knees and hands because I couldn't stop staring at it. Because I couldn't believe my eyes that so much soil went up in the sky.
Eventually, the soldiers made it to the city, only to run into ambushes. The fight was brutal, block by block.
We see some Russians running past the fence in front of us. Bandit and I were holding one room, we're watching the fence line.
Perfect moment to mow them down with a machine gun. But of course, Soviet-era gear had its own plans. Right when it mattered most, the PKM jammed, and the Canadians were one jammed bolt away from death.
You know, the most important weapon in the team doesn't work. So I took one of the other guys, I swapped out with him. Bandit was shooting back, and I run into another room trying to fix my PKM problem.
The machine gun is the backbone of infantry firepower. Without it, suppressing the enemy becomes a nightmare. Luckily, the team had more than one machine gunner. That redundancy may have saved lives.
I traded out PKMs with another Ukrainian PKM gunner because he got some shrapnel in the arm, so he couldn't use his PKM as effectively.
And just as the weapon was sorted out, the fight moved to close quarters. It was time to put all that training to the test.
Eventually, I noticed that the metal was wiggling and started to take a closer look. And yeah, 3 Russians were peeling it and pushing one of their men through to fit through. And I took my weapon off safe, put it on automatic. Keep in mind, this is 20 meters in front of me. Yeah, I aim my rifle.
Fortune favored the Canadians that night, but who knows how it would have ended if they hadn't fixed that machine gun jam in time.
He looks up at me, and there's the pure look of shock, and he grabs the fence like this, puts his feet forward and starts pushing back, but the guys with him, they weren't looking, so they're still pushing him through as he was trying to come back, and yeah, I ended up killing all 3 of them there.
Holding the line wasn't just a tactical challenge. It was a physical and mental one too. Imagine trying to fend off wave after wave of Russian assaults in freezing weather with barely any rest.
It was only about 3 minus 5, yeah. Not too cold, but you know, being out there for hours and hours, you know, we're not getting the calories we need kind of thing. You know, you start getting pretty cold, you get exhausted, staying awake so long. So that's kind of how it was almost every night. Some nights were colder than others.
The stress became a daily routine. No one was even thinking about pulling back. Giving up ground meant risking the lives of your brothers in arms.
Holding watch for 2 hours at a time at night, you know, because we'd switch off, do rotations, make sure guys got rest. And to sit there with the thermal camera, you know, just watching one area for hours and hours, it gets pretty, you know, pretty tiring. Especially after it's like, you know, day 3, day 4, day 5. It's just, yeah, just mental, physical exhaustion.
Russian shelling never stopped. The pressure only grew, and sometimes the shells came terrifyingly close.
Yeah, two shells ended up hitting our building directly. Luckily, everybody was okay, but yeah, it definitely shakes you up a bit, like, holy shit.
And no matter how tough or experienced you are, when the whole Russian arsenal starts flying your way, nobody's invincible.
So I was yelling out, I'm 300, I'm hit, and I was yelling out a guy's name that wasn't even there. You know, like I was yelling out like Archie or something like that. The guy wasn't even there.
But even with the ground shaking beneath him, the Canadian soldier kept his cool. His training in combat first aid and a quality tourniquet made all the difference.
But even being in that, the first reaction was drop on my back, take my tourniquet out, and apply the tourniquet immediately.
Of course, the chaos didn't stop there. They still had to evacuate the wounded, using civilian cars to reach the nearest M113s.
As soon as we start driving, literally like not even 2-3 seconds go by, you just see him do this, try this, all the brakes failed. Like there was no brakes in the car whatsoever, and they functioned up till that second.
And when they finally made it to the spot where the M113s were supposed to pick them up, surprise, surprise, the news got worse.
And then I guess we got the news that the M113s couldn't drive us out anymore. It was too risky, it was too much artillery fire on the road. We had to walk out on foot on an open road.
That road, it got a nickname real quick, the Highway of Death. Burned out vehicles lined the path, and shells were exploding non-stop.
Every 10-20 meters you'd step, there'd be a shell going off right next to you. Yeah, one of my friends, my machine gunner got hit.
We had 2 strikes come very, very close to us, to the point where my ears were ringing, my head was spinning.
But in the end, the Canadians and their Ukrainian brothers in arms completed the mission. Thanks to their teamwork, friendly forces were able to fall back to stronger positions. To take the city, Russia had to bring in up to 150,000 troops and suffered such massive equipment losses, they started throwing ancient BTR-90s and BTR-50s into the fight. The kind of stuff you'd expect to see in a museum, not a modern war. Imagine the scale of that battle for a town like Avdiivka. We're betting it was hell. More details about International Legion you can find on official website.
This machine gun seems to require biometric ID before firing. No palm on the touchpad, no shots. Some Ukrainian soldiers call it a gramophone, others a divine curse. One thing's for sure, it's the ultimate son of a bitch among machine guns. Damn it, why won't it fire? Meet the nearly forgotten DP-27. The 27 hints at its birth year, 1927. But if you've seen it labeled DP-28 in video games, sorry, that's a mistake. Its fire rate? A whopping 80 rounds per minute, 10 to 15 times slower than modern machine guns. But its range can reach 11,500 feet, which isn't too shabby. Once the standard for the Red Army and NKVD units, it's still kicking today. In 2022, DP-27s were handed to Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, and they're still popping up on the front lines, sometimes tricked out with Picatinny rails and modern optics. Some soldiers have even used it to shoot down Shahed drones. Old but effective. It's got some quirks though, making it trickier to master than you'd expect. First, this disc, the reason it's called a gramophone, holds 47 rounds of 7.62 millimeter ammo, stacked in a circular pattern, bullets pointing inward. See this funny little loop? It spins to show how much ammo is left. Pretty handy, right? But loading it? That's some next level kung fu. To load the disc, you need patience, or fewer fingers than Homer Simpson. First, insert a round, then twist the disc from the back. But wait, getting the disc into the gun takes a solid punch, and even then it won't fire unless you press the safety and trigger at the same time. Whoever designed this was definitely unique. But even that's not enough. You'd better say a prayer before firing, because the DP-27 loves to jam, especially when the enemy is charging your position. Why? Because the internal spring that feeds the rounds is either too strong when the disc is full, or too weak when it's half empty. Looks cool, but it's also the gun's biggest flaw. So why use a disc in the first place? Well, the Soviet Union was trying to copy the 1914 Lewis gun, but while the Lewis had a fancy lever system to rotate its drum, Soviet engineers found that too complicated, so they just slapped a spring inside instead. The result? The DP-27 spent its entire career feeling a little unfinished, but gun collectors still love it. In fact, you can still dig one up in parts of Europe, on old World War II battlefields. Support us with a like, it helps more people discover this video. But forgotten weapons aren't always just old junk. We see it! Fire! These are rare battlefield shots of the mysterious British air defense system Gravehawk, built around AIM-132 ASRAAM air-to-air missiles. But you won't find Gravehawk in any official catalog of British weaponry. Look closely, you can see that it uses Eurofighter jet pylons as launch rails, but instead of launching from a fighter, these missiles are fired vertically from a Super Cat truck chassis. AIM-132 missiles come with infrared homing, meaning all you need to do is point the system toward the target and let the missile lock on and do the rest. This container-sized innovation is being combat tested in real time and can even fire Ukrainian missiles. But Gravehawk isn't the only cutting-edge Western weapon Ukraine has that even its allies don't. Meet the 105mm howitzer mounted on a Humvee. Officially known as the 2CT Hawkeye, this American system was once dismissed by the Pentagon as not combat ready. But Ukraine's battlefield experience proved otherwise. One key feature that makes this cannon one of the most promising short-range artillery systems out there. It's called Soft Recoil Technology, SRT. Right before firing, a special mechanism pushes the gun slightly forward, absorbing the force of the shot before resetting to its original position. This allows the 2CT 2CT Hawkeye to fire 24 rounds in just 3 minutes. Its accuracy is ensured by a modern digital fire control system, and thanks to rapid targeting, the 2CT Hawkeye can fire its first round just 1.5 minutes after arriving at a position. That's a big deal because this gun only has a 7-mile range, meaning its crew is always within reach of enemy artillery and drones. But its quick deployment and retreat capabilities give it a serious advantage, rolling in, firing, and getting out before counter-battery fire can land. We covered the brutal life of artillery crews in a previous video. Check that out on our channel. But today we continue with another almost forgotten artillery system, the Grad P, which both sides use, though for Ukraine it's mostly a trophy weapon. The P in Grad P stands for partisan. Originally built in the Soviet Union from 1965 to 1972 for the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, these rockets were meant to rain down on American troops. Over 1,380 launchers were produced. Looks like a DIY weapon, doesn't it? But don't be fooled. Grad P is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Its launch rail is essentially a shorter version of the BM-21 Grad, and besides the tube itself, it has a tripod with aiming mechanisms and sights. The rocket is fired using a remote control with a 65.5-foot cable, meaning the operator can fire from cover, avoiding counter-battery fire. And here's the best part. Multiple Grad P launchers can be combined into a single system and mounted on just about anything. Our setup has 3 launch rails for 3 rockets. Now let's talk range. You might want to sit down for this. Grad P can fire 100-pound, 122mm rockets up to nearly 7 miles. And here's how they explode. But wait, there's an upgraded rocket that extends the range to 9.5 miles. And that's not even the limit. Hold on to your seat. Our system can fire at a distance of 40 kilometers. We have that type of ammunition. 40 kilometers, 25 miles, that's absolute madness. But what about accuracy? Well, not great. That's why Ukrainians use a clever tactic. First, they fire an incendiary round to force the enemy out of cover. Then they follow up with more precise weapons, artillery or kamikaze drones. Pretty diabolical, right? But hey, à la guerre comme à la guerre, as the French say. But Grad P isn't the only blast from the past. Recognize this tank? No, it's not a Soviet T-55. This is its tricked-out cousin, the M55S. Ukraine received these from Slovenia in late 2022, and they're basically the pony cars of tanks. Classic on the outside, high performance under the hood. What makes it special? Israeli upgrades. And not just Israeli. The modernization was done by Elbit Systems, and they went all out. First, the gun. The old Soviet 100mm cannon was replaced with a 105mm L7 gun, the same one found on the Leopard 1. It also got a thermal sleeve and electronic firing system. On top of that, the tank was equipped with a digital ballistic computer. Second, optics and targeting. The gunner now has a stabilized sight with a laser rangefinder, while the commander has his own sight, allowing him to spot and engage targets independently, even at night. Third, remote firepower. A remotely controlled weapon station from Rafael was installed on the turret, equipped with a 12.7 by 108mm heavy machine gun, the Soviet equivalent of the .50 caliber. And of course, there's still a coaxial 7.62mm PKT machine gun. And what about protection? The M55S got a full armor makeover. The turret, front hull, and upper sides were reinforced with Israeli Superblazer reactive armor, a mix of steel, rubber, and ceramics. Once in Ukraine, it was upgraded again, adding Contact 1 explosive reactive armor ERA on the front sides, and cage armor on the rear to defend against RPGs and drones. Of course, no amount of tuning can turn an old-school tank into cutting-edge tech, but the M55S can still hit its target and keep its crew alive. For example, it survived a direct hit from a 152mm Krasnopol-guided shell right to the turret, and guess what? The Ukrainian crew walked away unharmed, while the tank drove itself back from the battlefield. Another sign of how tough these tanks are, even 2 years after Ukraine received 28 of them, they're still showing up in frontline footage. Here's what a Ukrainian tanker has to say. This is the best job in the world. Let's wish them luck. Now, spotting the Soviet DNA under the M55S's modern armor wasn't too hard. What about this machine? Think it's just another modification of the American M113? Nope. Meet the PBV-302, a Swedish armored personnel carrier designed by Hägglund and Zuner in the 1960s. Before coming to Ukraine, this vehicle served exactly one country, Sweden. And now, all 180 units are fighting in the Ukrainian army. This thing has what the M113 was missing, starting with its main gun. It's armed with a powerful 20mm autocannon, made by Hispano-Suiza, now part of Swiss giant Oerlikon. This gun fires fast, 8 rounds per second. There's even an extra sight for targeting aircraft. It's mounted right here on the turret. We can engage air targets at altitudes of up to 2 kilometers. With a 505-round ammo capacity, it feeds from a magazine system, giving it rapid firepower. It's also got a 7.62mm KSP-58 machine gun, because why stop at just one weapon? This little APC is armed like James Bond. But it's not just about firepower. The Swedes made sure the crew of 2 and their 10 troops actually lived to fight another day. Unlike the aluminum-bodied M113, the PBV-302's armor is welded steel, strong enough to stop 50 caliber rounds. Its side armor is dual-layered. Its front armor can even withstand 20mm rounds. Of course, steel is heavier than aluminum, so the PBV-302 weighs about 3 tons more than its American cousin. But the Swedes solved that problem too, by giving it a Volvo engine that's 30% more powerful than the one in the M113. Seems like every vehicle in this video deserves a spot in the history books. But which one caught your attention the most? Tell us in the comments which forgotten weapon you'd like to see next. The hellish RM-70 Vampire, the rare Cub air defense system, or maybe you've got another idea? Drop it below. This system reliably destroys every aerial target that enters our area of responsibility. 2 minutes, and it's done. Most air defense battles don't last longer than that. If it weren't for the uniforms, you'd think these guys were working in a bank office or trading stocks at some brokerage in Frankfurt. For us, it's just a dot on a screen that moves. After the launch, it disappears. Maybe it doesn't look as intense as a ground assault or tank battle. Full deployment takes about 10 minutes. That's pretty good. But it's actually way more dangerous than it seems. This job is all about one rule: be fast or be dead. These operators trained in Germany, they fight with German equipment. At this point, it almost feels like they're in the Bundeswehr. But this story isn't about them. It's about their weapon. I met the war while serving on a book system near the city of Hostomel. Then I decided it was time to grow and learn something new. Most people recognize this as a mobile surface-launched missile system. And yes, the launcher is a big part of it, but the real magic, the top secret stuff, is hiding inside those launch containers, the missiles. The feeling from the first launches, from the first operation, was truly impressive. Imagine having one thing that works with everything, like a golden ratio of weapons. And yes, the Germans may have just reinvented it. The IRIS-T, short for Infrared Imaging System Tail, was originally designed as a short-range air-to-air missile. Its trick? Actually, it has a bunch. First, its insane agility, thanks to the thrust vectoring and the control system. Each of its 4 fins has its own drive system, which means this missile can pull off some wild stunts. Right after launch, it can hit up to 60 Gs. Yeah, 60. That's why they sometimes call it the Acrobat missile. And get this, it can even do a full 180 midair and chase a target that's behind the launching aircraft. Not bad if something nasty is on your 6, right? IRIS-T hits speeds of Mach 3, that's over 3,000 kilometers per hour. Good luck outrunning that. Your like tells YouTube the video is worth watching and helps us reach an even bigger audience. Aside from speed and agility, this missile is insanely accurate. To lock onto a target, IRIS-T uses a mix of guidance systems that complement each other: satellite navigation, a radio command link, an inertial system, and an infrared seeker with a synthetic sapphire lens. Here's another cool trick. As it approaches the target, the missile builds an image and compares it to reference targets stored in its memory. That lets IRIS-T aim for the most vulnerable parts of the target and, more importantly, ignore flares and other decoys. And here's the real kicker. IRIS-T can be launched from almost any modern fighter jet. It's standard on Eurofighter Typhoons and works with certain variants of the F-16, F/A-18 Hornet, the Gripen, even the old-school Tornado. No joke. They even tested it on an F-4 Phantom at one point. And check this out. Here's an IRIS-T mounted under the wing of South Korea's KF-21 Boramae, 4++ generation multi-role jet. Rumor has it even the F-35 plays nice with it. More than a dozen air forces have picked IRIS-T over the Sidewinder. That's because its diameter, length, weight, center of gravity, and launcher interface are all compatible. Basically, it fits anywhere a Sidewinder would, and hits harder. So yeah, the IRIS-T conquered the skies. But the Germans weren't done. They brought it down to earth, literally. And once again, they found that golden middle, a weapon that does everything. The IRIS-T SL surface launched. Program kicked off in 2007 with one idea in mind: launch an air-to-air missile from the ground. Technically challenging? Sure. Impossible? Not even close. Americans turned their AIM-7 Sparrow into the ship-launched RIM-7 Sea Sparrow. The French-Italian Aster system is based on the Mika air-to-air missile, and the American SlamRam ER uses AMRAAM airframes as its core. So DL Defense took the same path and nailed it. In 2018, they showcased the IRIS-T SLS surface launch standard on a tracked BV-410 platform with an integrated Saab Giraffe 1X radar. The next year, Sweden demoed their own version on the Eldenhet 98 vehicle. And in 2022, we saw the IRIS-T SLS mounted on an armored Moag Eagle 6x6. We have two types of ground-based IRIS-T, the SLS and the SLM. Ukraine's version of the IRIS-T SLS comes with a 4-missile launcher mounted on an Iveco Eurocargo 4x4 truck chassis, which basically means if you've got the money, the paperwork, and a pickup, DL Defense could probably strap an IRIS-T to it. Just be ready for a very, very long wait. Okay, we're joking, but these systems really are in short supply. We need more systems because we have a lot, over 400 sites, that constantly need to be protected from enemy strikes. According to the German government, Ukraine has received 2 IRIS-T SLS batteries so far, with 6 more on the way. Not bad, but not a lot, especially when you consider how many critical infrastructure sites need protection and the system's limited range. Unfortunately, speeding up production just isn't realistic right now. That's why Ukraine's short-range air defense is a patchwork of whatever can shoot straight, from M2 Brownings to the legendary Gepard. You can check out how they work in our earlier videos. Still, IRIS-T remains one of the most effective weapons in the game. The first ground-based IRIS-T systems arrived in Ukraine back in October 2022, and according to DL Defense, by June 2024, they had taken down over 240 aerial targets with an almost perfect success rate. On the very first day on the job, all targets were shot down. It made a big impression. When it comes to my unit, our hit rate is 99%. IRIS-T SLS uses the original air-to-air missile, but since it's being launched from the ground, its range drops from 20 to around 12 kilometers. Still, a ceiling of 8 kilometers is a solid number for taking out drones. And there's more. There's at least one confirmed case of the SLS taking out a Russian KH-101 cruise missile. According to some reports, this is one of Putin's favorites. He even monitors the remaining stock himself. You're now watching the destruction of 2 KH-101 cruise missiles. In total, 4 KH-101s were taken down in that battle within just 30 seconds. The KH-101 is air-launched and has a range of up to 5,500 kilometers when fired from a Tu-95 MS or Tu-160 bomber. It's considered a tough target to intercept. One such missile struck Ukraine's largest children's hospital, Alkmaar. The wreckage found at the scene confirmed it. But Germany's not just sending short-range systems. They've also supplied Ukraine with IRIS-T SLM, the medium-range version. And get this, Ukraine received them before the German army did. What we see on our radar, we can share that information with neighboring air defense systems. With longer range and better radar, the IRIS-T SLM can track and eliminate targets from farther away. And honestly, this might be the most advanced air defense system of the entire war. It can take down strike drones, cruise missiles, helicopters, fighter jets. The radar station can spot targets up to 250 kilometers away. Each missile comes with a high explosive fragmentation warhead triggered by either a proximity radar fuse or a contact fuse. And that brings some serious perks. One time, a single missile took out 2 targets. Total fluke. 2 cruise missiles were flying side by side, one got hit, and the explosion took out the second one with shrapnel. The IRIS-T SLM has a range of up to 40 kilometers, with a ceiling of 20 kilometers, making it much better suited for intercepting missiles and aircraft. But to hit those numbers, the original IRIS-T air-to-air missile had to be completely overhauled and upsized. Think of it like inflating a balloon, or giving Arnie's biceps a boost. The SLM is also a more complex system overall. It's not just one launcher, it's a whole network. But here's the smart part. The system doesn't depend on a specific chassis. All components are built to fit standard 20-foot containers, which makes logistics much easier. It's built on a plug-and-fight architecture. The standard setup includes a radar unit, a control station with operator consoles, and launchers with 8 missiles each. And get this, the launcher can be up to 20 kilometers away from the command center, and the radar can share targeting data with other operators. That modular design is why IRIS-T was easily integrated into Ukraine's air defense forms excellently. Its effectiveness shows that not a single enemy aerial target reaches its destination. After seeing real combat use in Ukraine, the IRIS-T SLM has become a bestseller, and its missile is now turning into the backbone of Europe's air defense. But Germany's Deal defense isn't stopping there. The upcoming IRIS-T SLX, first revealed last year, is designed to reach 80 kilometers in range and hit targets at altitudes up to 30 kilometers. These specs are impressive, but that extra range will come from entirely new missiles, different from the ones used on the SLM. What kind of missiles are they? No official word yet. But we'll be watching closely because this channel is all about bringing you the latest in battlefield tech. So hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop. Also, Germany plans to integrate the IRIS-T SLM into its F125 class frigates. There's even a naval version of the IRIS-T designed for submarines, known as IDAS for Type 209 and Type 212, A-subs of the German Navy. But we can't pretend it's all perfect. The IRIS-T system comes with 2 major downsides, and the first one? Price. Yeah, friend, this isn't exactly a budget buy. So one IRIS-T missile in either the air-to-air or surface-launched standard version costs 900,000 euros. The surface-launched medium variant is even more expensive. During the war, Ukraine received 658 missiles. Imagine the total bill. Meanwhile, a Shahed kamikaze drone costs around 45,000 to 50,000 euros. But this isn't just about money. Russia launches dozens to hundreds of Shaheds every day. Shooting them down with IRIS-Ts is like firing golden bullets at rats. You can guess who wins that game in the long run. The Germans understand this too. That's why the creators of IRIS-T are now working on something new. A small anti-drone missile called Cicada, previously known as M-Missile. It looks like it's getting close to serial production. The Cicada carries 0.5 kilograms of explosives, enough to destroy recon or long-range Shahed-type drones. It's part of a bigger system called Sky Sphere, which was shown off at a defense expo in Nuremberg. But how fast Germany can get these into mass production? That's still a big question. The second big drawback of the IRIS-T-based systems is that they can't shoot down ballistic missiles. Unlike the GEM-T or PAC-3 MSE missiles used in Patriot systems, which use a hit-to-kill principle with no warhead, the IRIS-T uses a fragmentation warhead. It's just not designed to take out high-speed ballistic threats. So, what's the plan? For now, Germany is buying Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system. The US already gave the green light for the sale. Needed because the Arrow 3 uses American tech and is partly funded by Washington. What topic should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments. We'll choose from the most liked ones.
Есть захват! 406! Готовимся! 3900! 833! 3800! Еще! 700! Еще! 3600! Есть разрешение на огонь! Есть перезахоплення!
Another target eliminated, another few Ukrainian lives saved. We may not know their names, but we do know the name of their protector, Flugabwehrkanonen Panzer Gepard. Or simply the Gepard anti-aircraft tank. And hold on, looks like it's still busy. Another one down. Not bad, but not a record yet. If not for the war in Ukraine, hundreds of 45-year-old Gepards would be rusting away in junkyards. And that's the best case scenario because practical-minded Germans usually just melt down outdated machines. The Bundeswehr officially retired Gepards in 2011, claiming they had critical flaws that made them unfit for modern warfare. You'll learn about those soon, but despite this, armies worldwide still want similar systems. And Ukraine is snapping up Gepards wherever it can find them. Let's start with the basics. This machine comes in twos. 2 radars, 2 cannons, 2 engines. Seems like German engineers built the Gepard for every possible scenario. Your like helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. This radar mounted on the back of the turret in travel position is the search radar. When in use, it deploys and spins at 60 RPM, maybe not as fast as a German washing machine, but just as silent and reliable. It has an effective range of 9.3 miles. Once it detects a target, it feeds the data to the tracking and targeting radar, which locks onto the target in a 200-degree arc. You can see it mounted on a swivel bracket. Both radars operate independently, come with electronic countermeasure protection, and feature built-in self-diagnostics. Once the data is processed, the fire control system calculates the perfect firing moment. Here's how that plays out. Locking on, tracking, and firing. Sounds simple, right? Not quite. The operator is just being modest. The true brains of the system is the onboard computer, which works so fast it actually needs to be reined in. That's the operator's job, to authorize each shot, because you can't just fire away if the target is over a city or a sensitive site. We only shoot them down over open fields or water. But the onboard computer isn't just an overachiever, it also has veto power. If it detects a faulty shell, it blocks the firing sequence. Seems like a good thing, ensuring no dude rounds get chambered. However, some reports suggest the computer is a little too sensitive. But that's not why the Bundeswehr retired the Gepard. The issue is that this system was designed back in the early 1970s. The original concept was to shield armored columns on the move and defend stationary targets against helicopters and low-flying aircraft in all weather conditions, day and night. The problem? Modern air-to-ground missiles outrange the Gepard's 2.5-mile effective range. Take the Vichur anti-tank missile, used by Russian Su-25T attack aircraft and Ka-50, Ka-52 helicopters. It has a 5-mile range. The Ataka-D system, up to 6 miles. The Kh-39, 9 miles. This means that in a modern battlefield scenario, the Gepard isn't the hunter, it's the prey. Even its turret-mounted smoke launchers wouldn't save it. Just buy it a little time before the inevitable. But in Ukraine, the Gepard found a second life, hunting drones and subsonic cruise missiles. It detects and destroys them with ease, and it does it with style. Just listen to the voice of its twin, 35mm Oerlikon autocannons. These Swiss-made beauties have a service ceiling of 13,000 feet. They won't touch ballistic missiles, but when it comes to swarming kamikaze drones, they're absolute killers. Near Odessa, a single Gepard took down 10 targets in a short period. No wonder the muzzle brake on these twins looks like a crown. Their combined rate of fire? A blistering 1,100 rounds per minute, 550 per barrel. But here's the catch. The Gepard carries just 640 rounds total, and reloading takes an agonizing 20 minutes. That's why the operator often switches to controlled bursts, single shots or 10 to 12 round bursts. Fortunately, that's more than enough to take down a Shahed drone. For example, taking down a UAV at a distance of 3 kilometers required just 11 rounds. That's efficiency, and in this war, every round counts. Let's add one more detail. If a shell misses, it self-destructs, and these cannons aren't just for aerial targets. Imagine those terrifying shells, each weighing between 1.2 and 1.65 pounds, ripping through 115 millimeters of armor, and turning the target into Swiss cheese. On top of that, the Gepard moves pretty well, hitting speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. Its 10-cylinder engine is a thirsty beast, guzzling about 150 liters per 100 kilometers, but it delivers an honest 830 German horsepower. Meanwhile, its onboard systems run off a second engine that sips a modest 20 liters per hour. But most importantly, the Gepard has fantastic off-road capabilities, thanks to its tank chassis. This proved to be a major advantage in combat, especially during the battles of fall 2022. It's built on the Leopard 1 platform. However, Ukrainian forces have largely stopped using Gepards near the front lines. For one, its armor is much thinner than the Leopard 1. The 30mm steel plating at the front is enough to stop bullets and shrapnel, but won't handle anything bigger. And with just 15mm of armor on top, it's not built for today's battlefield, because modern warfare has changed. The skies over the front line are now swarming with FPV drones, each carrying a shaped charge. These little buzzing killers are an even bigger threat to armor than attack helicopters or jets. Any vehicle rolling out on a mission risks taking multiple FPV hits in just minutes. And let's not forget the Lancet kamikaze drones, real vultures of the battlefield, striking Ukrainian vehicles from dozens of miles away. They've become a nightmare for armor. We've covered the brutal realities faced by Western tanks, Abrams, Leopard, and Challenger on this battlefield in several videos. It's clear that the role of tanks and armored vehicles is undergoing a massive rethink. We're keeping a close eye on these changes, so subscribe to our channel, not just to support us, but to see more Western weapons in action. So the Gepard is used wherever it's needed, but at a safe distance from the front lines. Even in the rear, though, there are far too many places that need protection, and Ukraine only has about 55 of these systems. Given its effective range, that's nowhere near enough. And then there's the issue of ammo shortages. At first, Switzerland refused to supply 35mm Oerlikon rounds to Ukraine, citing its neutrality. Then it went even further and blocked their re-export. Eventually, the issue got sorted, and Ukraine recently secured a deal for 180,000 rounds. But Rheinmetall still hasn't delivered on a 300,000 round order placed all the way back in February 2023. Despite all this, Ukraine is doubling down on these shells, since they're not just for the Gepard. They also go into the Cheetah, the Dutch variant of the Gepard, which comes with an upgraded radar and fire control system. On top of that, Ukraine has also received Skynex systems, straight from Germany. This platform, developed by Rheinmetall Air Defense, is designed for stationary defense. It's not a self-propelled system, but it can be transported and deployed where needed. Right now, Skynex batteries are protecting airfields, critical infrastructure, and other strategic sites. A Skynex battery consists of 4 Oerlikon Mk3 35mm cannons, a command post, and a radar station that detects targets and directs the guns. It has a slightly longer range than the Gepard at 16,500 feet, but let's be honest, what really matters is how it sounds. Listen to these beauties. Pure firepower in stereo. The Oerlikon MK3 also has an insane rate of fire, 1,000 rounds per minute. To keep this beast under control, Skynex uses 7-round clips to prevent it from going full berserk. And finally, its biggest trick, the AHEAD airburst rounds. Each of these rounds carries 152 tungsten projectiles, each weighing 3.3 grams. When detonated near a target, They create a cloud of shrapnel that shreds everything in its path. That makes Skynecks an even deadlier drone killer. But what about crew safety? Surprise! It doesn't even need a crew on site. The Skynecks firing unit is fully unmanned. The operator stays safe inside a separate command post, while the system's radar can detect targets from up to 31 miles away. That means they see incoming threats minutes before they enter the kill zone. Still, that doesn't make their job any less thrilling. But can Skynecks be mounted on a chassis to create a mobile air defense system? Absolutely. The system is based on Skyranger 30/35 from Rheinmetall, which is expected to become a key part of Europe's air defense network. Its effective range, 5 miles. Just days ago, Rheinmetall delivered a prototype of the Skyranger 30 to the Bundeswehr, mounted on a Boxer armored vehicle. This setup helps standardize components across the fleet, making maintenance easier. The Skyranger's cannon will also use airburst rounds for even greater effectiveness against drones. The Skyranger can also be mounted on Leopard 1 or Leopard 2 tank chassis. But what's the better setup for today's battlefield? Wheeled or tracked? Or is it best to keep the crew completely separate in a remote command post? Drop your thoughts in the comments. According to commander of the Ukrainian Navy, we were no match for the Black Sea Fleet. That's putting it mildly. At the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia outnumbered Ukraine in the Black Sea 12-1. Political scientist Andrew Mack even coined a term for this kind of matchup, asymmetric conflict. And Ukraine's Neptun missile? That was the asymmetric answer to Russia's dominance at sea. At the beginning of the war, we met the enemy on our shores. Now we meet him on his. Hard to argue with that, even for skeptics, because when the Neptun missile sank the cruiser Moskva, it became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. And this wasn't some leaky Soviet tugboat. This was the flagship of the Russian Navy, 612 feet long, crewed by over 500 sailors and officers. That cruiser was designed in the 1970s and 80s to take out American aircraft carriers. The Moskva carried a helicopter, a twin 130mm naval gun, 6 AK-630 CIWS cannons, torpedoes, anti-submarine rocket launchers, S-300F long-range SAMs, and roughly 140 missiles of various types. And don't forget, right next to the cruiser was the frigate Makarov, which had its own beefy air defense system. The Neptun, on the other hand, was designed to take out ships up to 5,000 tons. The Moskva? Over 11,000 tons. So how did a couple send one of Russia's biggest warships straight to the bottom? What do you think happened? Come on, we're not that naive. Ukraine is clearly keeping a few cards up its sleeve, and this missile deserves a much closer look. Let's start by clearing up a popular myth. Even many seasoned weapons experts think the Ukrainian ER-360 Neptun is just a copy of the old Soviet KH-35, designed back in the 1980s. Spoiler, it's not. Sure, they look similar. Both have that sleek cruise missile vibe, kind of like a Tomahawk, but that's where the similarities end. First off, Neptun is physically larger than the KH-35. Second, it's fully integrated with Ukraine's digital battlefield systems. That means it can receive target coordinates in real time from drones, satellites, or coastal radar stations. Something the old Soviet tech couldn't dream of. And third, let's not forget, Russia only started using modern KH-35 variants on ships and coastal systems in the early 2000s. 2003 for the naval Uran version, 2004 for the land-based BAL. Neptun? It showed up a decade later with some serious upgrades. But Ukraine's Neptun anti-ship missile didn't even exist in the Soviet era. It only entered development in 2010 and took nearly a decade to complete, because Ukraine first had to build up the defense industry from scratch. So yeah, the whole, it's just a Soviet copy myth, totally busted. Hit that like button and subscribe. Not just because it's nice, but because YouTube's algorithm listens to you. The more support you give, the more people get to hear the truth. And if you've already joined the crew, let's move on to the next big myth. How exactly did Ukraine manage to sink Russia's most prized warship? Here's what we know. At the start of the war, Ukraine had just 2 Neptun systems. That's 8 launchers with a full salvo of 24 missiles, and just a few dozen rockets to go around. Hardly a mass-produced wonder weapon. And let's be honest, Ukraine's coastal missile units, they didn't even exist before the war. In the spring of 2022, we got our first batch of Neptun missiles. We were supposed to run qualification tests, just to confirm the specs and check if they even worked. But, well, we ended up testing them on actual targets. The cruiser Moskva was one of them. Yeah, no pressure. This is where luck started tipping in Ukraine's favor. Using an untested missile in combat? Risky doesn't even begin to cover it, but war makes gamblers of everyone, especially when a floating palace like the Moskva wanders into range. Now here's the problem. At the time of the strike, Ukraine didn't have any over-the-horizon radars, and the Russians knew it. So how the hell did they even find the Moskva? I won't go into details, but yeah, we knew where the enemy ships were operating. We tracked them. We waited, not just for the cruiser, but for others too. Fair enough. Let's look at the rumors. Version 1. According to The New Yorker on April 13, 2022, Ukraine asked a NATO intel center in Europe to confirm a radar contact. They got the green light. Target confirmed. Version 2. The New York Times says it happened during a routine intel exchange. US and Ukrainian officers were looking at radar screens when, boom, something unexpected popped up. Oh, look, that's the Moskva. Holy sh... Don't worry, Mr. Trump. Ukraine did say thanks to the Americans for that one. Version 3. Some claim the weather helped. With heavy cloud cover and a narrow air corridor between sea and sky, the radar beam just bounced perfectly and caught the ship by accident. Version 4. A Bayraktar drone was circling overhead, quietly tracking the cruiser and feeding coordinates to the missile team. Ah yes, the fog of war. So, which story do you buy? Let us know in the comments. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or maybe you've got your own theory. Let's see how good your intuition is, because we're about to reveal what really happened. The whole operation took less than an hour. The Neptun system is mounted on Kraz or Tatra-wheeled chassis, so it can quickly deploy and launch from improvised positions. It works on a networked structure. Launchers can be spaced up to 25 kilometers from the command center. So once Ukrainian forces confirmed the cruiser was patrolling a certain sector, a launcher rolled into firing position. That percent of the time. Another 20% went into setup, and the last 10%, that was the missile's flight to target. Here's how it went down. Before launch, the operator entered the general patrol area. Not the exact coordinates, just the vector where the ship was expected. Then came the launch. And from that moment on, Moskva was done for. The sea is a battlefield with no trenches, no ridgelines. You can't hide out there. Once a Neptun's in the air, switching from prey to predator is not really an option. The missile flies low, really low, to stay under the radar horizon. At sea, the horizon is how far you can see before Earth's curvature hides the target. For a missile trying to sneak up, this matters a lot. Neptun flies at altitudes as low as 3 meters, making it very hard to detect. This is where Neptun's biggest advantages kick in. Yes, it has its own radar, but here's the trick. It stays off for most of the flight. The missile cruises in silence and only powers up its radar in the final few kilometers before impact. That makes it really hard to spot in advance. This missile is brutally effective. Its radar cross-section is tiny. It's a compact missile. It can autonomously strike targets up to 285 kilometers away, even if they're moving. When the radar turns on, it scans, locks on, and makes its final corrections, all automatically. Now, with a cruising speed of 270 to 300 meters per second, the defending ship's got maybe 60 to 100 seconds, on a good day, to shoot it down. And Moskva's day wasn't a good one. Based on the intel we have, it seems that 2 of the ship's 3 air defense layers weren't even active, meaning the stations were empty. Yeah, the Russians were that confident their fancy flagship couldn't be touched by Ukrainian missiles. So confident, apparently, they didn't even bother turning their air defense on. Oops! Even then, the Moskva had plenty of chances to stay afloat. After all, a 150-kilogram warhead isn't exactly enough to sink a massive warship. That's like a rookie boxer landing a punch on Mike Tyson's shoulder. It stings, sure, but not a knockout. Still, as we said, that was a bad day for the Russians. One missile hit the crew dining hall, the biggest room on the ship. Below that is the forward engine room. Next to it is the central command post, and above it are the ammo stores for the AK-130s, basically Moskva's Achilles heel. So the crew of a now disabled cruiser, on fire after a hit in a critical spot, was suddenly without its captain. That's when panic likely kicked in. The second missile struck the aft section near the hangar. The hangar's another large compartment where the helicopter and all its fuel and fluids are kept. Probably went up in flames too. Then a small storm started helping water pool in the lower decks. The ship sank while they were trying to drag it back to Sevastopol. It was a freak chain of events. God was on our side. God's hand in missile guidance. Now that's new, but for anyone who's ever been to war, not entirely surprising. The Slava-class cruiser Moskva sank. An irony alert, she was built in Mykolaiv, southern Ukraine. The people who built her are still living under Russian shelling. After Moskva's destruction, some of her gear and debris washed up on Ukrainian shores. It's now on display in a museum. So yeah, the cruiser did return to port. Just not the way her crew hoped. Chilling, huh? Some might say this proves the Neptun's success was just dumb luck, that it snuck up because the air defenses were asleep at the wheel, but nope. Even if the radars had been on, Moskva still would have been in serious trouble, and here's why. She wasn't Neptun's first victim. Just days before the big kill, the Russian frigate Admiral Essen was damaged. That was Neptun's first confirmed combat use. The frigate limped back to Sevastopol for repair. No, this wasn't luck. Ukrainians were actively hunting Russian ships, and they weren't just lucky. They had a plan. Sooner or later, Moskva was going to get wrecked. The only question was when. After she went down, the entire Russian Black Sea fleet basically froze. Any grand plans for an amphibious assault on Odessa or Mykolaiv? Poof, gone. And later, Ukrainian sea drones finished what Neptun started. We actually have a full video on our channel that documents every Ukrainian drone strike on Russian warships, but Ukrainians didn't stop there. Of course, throughout the war, Neptun has evolved and improved, like any modern missile system. On September 14, 2023, upgraded Neptun missiles destroyed a Russian S-400 air defense system in Crimea. And let's be honest, that's no less juicy than hitting a frigate. On March 26, 2024, a Neptun strike disabled the landing ship Konstantin Olshansky, once Ukrainian until Russia snatched it during the occupation of Crimea. And then on April 21st, Neptun took out the one-of-a-kind Kamuna rescue ship, right in occupied Sevastopol. The Neptun we have now is a whole lot more capable than the version originally adopted. But here's the real plot twist. What if I told you Neptun now has a land attack version with a range of up to 1,000 kilometers? Yep, it's real. Meet the Long Neptun. First reports of its development surfaced in late 2023. And the current performance stats? Impressive. May 31st, 2024. Strike on the ferry crossing and oil terminal at Russia's Port Kavkaz. June 21st, 2024. Hit on a storage facility for long-range Shahed kamikaze drones near Yeysk airfield. July 23rd, 2024. Strike on the Slavyanin ferry servicing the Port Kavkaz crossing. July 31st, 2024. Strike on a Russian army equipment depot near Kursk, which helped set up Ukraine's Kursk offensive. August 22nd, 2024. Hit on the Conroe trader ferry, carrying dozens of fuel tankers to Port Kavkaz. And for 2025, January 10th, strike on a Russian drone and ammo warehouse near the village of Chaltyr. March 15th, one of Russia's largest oil refineries in Tuapse was struck. These land strikes show how Neptun has evolved beyond its original role. Turning an anti-ship missile into a long-range land strike weapon? That's no weekend garage project. It's an incredibly complex engineering challenge, made even tougher by war conditions, Russian spy drones, missile strikes on factories, and supply chain sabotage, even across borders. So yeah, the tech specs of Long Neptun are classified tighter than Grandma's secret pierogi recipe. But hey, maybe Long Neptun doesn't even exist. Maybe Ukraine is firing something else entirely and Neptun's just the decoy? Write in the comments if we should dig into this topic. Remember, your comments decide what videos we make next.